Hey guys, tonight we're drifting back to a place you're probably glad you'll never visit, Georgian London. It's not the place from postcards or period dramas, trust me. There's a thin layer of soot on everything. The air smells like boiled cabbage and coal dust, and the sound of horse hooves slapping through mud is constant. And you're not just here to sightsee. No, tonight you're living the very damp, very foggy and very chemically enhanced life of a laudanum addict. Honestly, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. I always find it oddly comforting. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The year is 1811. You wake up slowly, buried under a moth-eaten blanket that smells like mildew and unspoken regrets. The single window in your small rented room filters in the dull grey light of a London morning. You think it might be raining, or it just might be the mist rolling off the Thames again. Honestly, who can tell anymore? The wooden floor is so cold it bites your feet, and there's the usual scratching sound in the wallboards. Rats or dreams, maybe both. You sit up with a groan, not from age, but from the weight of waking. On the nightstand, nestled between a cracked candle and a forgotten crust of bread, is the one thing that makes mornings tolerable. A brown glass bottle with a peeling label that reads Tincture of Opium. The cork is half chewed from nervous fingernails and lazy resealing. You don't even use a spoon anymore, just a slow, reverent tilt to the lips. Warm bitterness floods your mouth, and already your stomach knots with the promise of relief. This is laudanum, your love, your ruin, your most reliable companion. It's alcohol infused with powdered opium, a thick bitter syrup passed out like candy at every apothecary from Soho to Southwark. You don't need a prescription, just a few pence and a twitchy expression. The city runs on it. So do you. You shuffle over to the corner where your basin sits under a dripping pipe. The water is cloudy and frigid, but you splash some on your face anyway. It doesn't help. Your reflection caught in the metal surface of a shaving mirror looks like someone who's been underwater for too long, pale, slightly bloated, and forever surprised to still be alive. You notice the shake in your hand has gotten worse. That's new, or maybe it's just the way the candlelight hits your bones. Out the window, the city yawns to life. Carriages rattle over cobblestone, their wheels clapping like worn-out applause. Chimney sweeps are already darting between rooftops, smudged ghosts in top hats. Somewhere a baby cries. Somewhere else, someone starts singing drunkenly and very off-key. You lean your head against the glass and breathe in the thick, smoky morning. It sticks to your lungs like soot. Your room is barely wide enough to lie down in, but you've learned to be small. A thin mattress, a three-legged stool, a cracked jug with some kind of alcohol in it, though you don't remember what. The walls are stained with ancient moisture, and you think you might see faces in the mould patterns. Sometimes they whisper to you. But not today. Today is quiet. Laudanum doesn't give you the pleasure it used to. In the beginning it made everything shimmer with softness. It filled the empty places with warmth and turned every thought into poetry. Now it's just the thing that lets you walk in a straightish line and not scream when the withdrawal hits. It smooths the edges, but also erases them. You can't remember the last time you laughed without wincing, and yet, in a strange way, this is normal. This is routine. You dress slowly, buttoning your stained waistcoat over a yellowed shirt. Your trousers sag at the knees, and your boots have holes you stuff with newspaper. Downstairs, the landlady eyes you with her usual mix of suspicion and pity, handing you a slice of stale bread without meeting your gaze. She doesn't ask if you'll be paying this week. Out in the street, the world feels far away, like you're watching it from behind a veil. People bustle past you, their faces pinched against the cold. You pass a butcher with blood on his apron, two children arguing over a dead pigeon, and a preacher shouting about eternal fire. None of it touches you, not really. You float. As you turn the corner toward the apothecary, a thin man in a green coat bumps into you and mutters an apology. You think he looks familiar, but everyone looks familiar now. Faces blur, conversations melt into each other. Time is bendy. The apothecary is exactly where it always is, wedged between a used bookseller and a pawn shop full of broken clocks. The bell tinkles when you enter, and the scent hits you. Herbs, damp wood, and something coppery you can't place. Behind the counter, a young woman with ink-stained fingers barely looks up. She knows why you're here. Everyone knows why you're here. You hand over a coin and she gives you a new bottle. No questions, no warnings, no judgment, just transaction. That's part of the beauty of it. Laudanum doesn't come with lectures. It comes with silence. As you step back onto the street, your fingers curl tightly around the glass bottle in your coat pocket. You feel it there, warm from your palm, pulsing like a second heart. The city moves around you, louder now, faster. Or maybe you're just slower. You head toward the park, there's a bench there where no one bothers you. You like the way the trees look when you're a few sips in, how they lean toward you like old friends. You'll sit there a while, maybe write something in your notebook that won't make sense tomorrow, maybe feed the birds, maybe stare into the grey sky until the sun forgets to come back. No one ever said this was glamorous. It's not romantic. It's just the day, your day, again. The apothecary you frequent doesn't have a name posted above the door. Just a hanging wooden sign with a faded mortar and pestle carved into it, swaying in the wind like it's unsure whether it wants to stay. You've been coming here for years, though time isn't something you track anymore with much precision. There are days when you think you've known the man behind the counter forever, and others when you wonder if he might be someone entirely different each time. Today he's there, Mr. Penrose, or so he says, middle-aged, with thinning hair and a constant look of damp irritation, like he's been walking through drizzle since birth. He wears spectacles that always slide down his nose and a dark apron with mysterious stains you have wisely never asked about. He doesn't smile when you come in, he never has, but he does nod. A kind of recognition, if not affection. The sort you give a regular who's beyond saving. He's mixing something in a brass mortar as you step inside. The clink of pestle against metal is oddly rhythmic, almost soothing. Shelves line the walls from floor to ceiling, cluttered with brown bottles, parchment labels curling at the edges, and faded jars filled with powders in unsettling hues. Amber, ash grey, even a pale green that glows faintly in the gloom. The scent in here is stronger than usual today. Dried herbs, vinegar, mould, and something oddly floral like crushed violets left to rot in a cellar. Mr. Penrose doesn't ask what you want. He simply turns, plucks a small bottle from behind the counter, and sets it down in front of you. The clink is familiar, reassuring. He slides it forward without looking up, already turning back to whatever strange remedy he was concocting. You reach into your pocket, pull out a few coins, and set them beside the bottle. You could swear they're lighter than they used to be. Money doesn't hold on the way it did before the tincture. It disappears just like your sense of urgency, your ability to feel cold properly, or your memory of what a full stomach feels like. Still, the bottle is yours now, and that's all that really matters. There was a time when you asked questions, what was in it, how much was too much, whether it was safe to take every day. Those curiosities burned out quickly, like matches in the wind. The answers were never satisfying, and besides, no one else seems to be asking. Not the housewives who come in for their nerve tonic, or the writers who need inspiration, or the old men with their shaking hands. Everyone here already knows. This isn't medicine, it's maintenance. You glance around the shop while Penrose grinds his mystery mixture. A faded pamphlet tacked to the wall reads, "For agitations of the mind and weakness of the spirit, tincture of opium, recommended," in overly enthusiastic lettering. There's a dried-up snake coiled in a jar near the cash box, floating in something that looks like regret. Next to it is a display of pills meant to revitalize the soul, and a small hand-painted sign that says, "No refunds, no exceptions." You wonder briefly who tried to bring something back. There's a soft chime as the door opens behind you and a woman enters, wrapped in a shawl too fine for this neighborhood, eyes hollow, mouth a tight line. She doesn't look at you. She doesn't need to. The code among people like you is silence. She moves to the counter and murmurs something to Penrose. He disappears behind a curtain without a word. You tuck your bottle into your inner coat pocket and step outside, back into the haze. The street's gotten busier. Horses clatter by, carriages wheel past, and chimney smoke curls into the air in thick, slow ribbons. The morning fog hasn't lifted. It's just gotten lazier, draping itself over the city like a damp coat. You turn left this time, away from the park, toward the Thames. The river smells like old fish and secrets. You stand on a footbridge, watching the grey water curl around itself like it's trying to forget where it came from. Barges move slowly beneath you, piled with coal or barrels of something flammable. A man is urinating against a stone pillar just out of view, muttering a song under his breath. Another man, much too well dressed for this part of town, stares into the water like it owes him something. You uncork the bottle, take a slow sip. The bitterness is sharp this time, more so than usual. It bites the back of your throat and burns a little as it goes down, but within seconds it starts to work. That pleasant dissociation, the slow detachment, the emotional novocaine. You're not part of the world, but you're watching it again, and somehow that's enough. You sit on a stone bench near the water, bottle tucked inside your coat again like a sleeping infant. Two children run past you, laughing in a language you can't quite follow. One of them is missing a shoe. A seagull lands nearby, eyes you, then waddles off with a disdain that feels personal. There's a strange comfort in knowing that everything around you will continue whether or not you participate. Once this would have felt like wasting the day. But that concept doesn't mean much anymore. Time is flexible now. Days bleed into nights, nights into more days, and it all feels like a long, slow dream you're only half present for. Sometimes you write things down in your little notebook, just to prove to yourself that you were awake at some point. Most of it is unreadable scrawl, some of it is poetry, the rest, well, you stop trying to organise it. A man selling hot chestnuts walks by, the scent momentarily cutting through the city's usual bouquet of coal smoke and decay. Your stomach growls, but it's a distant sensation, like hearing someone else's hunger through a wall. You could eat, sure, but you could also not. The tincture fills more than one kind of emptiness. A nearby church bell tolls the hour and you flinch. Loud sounds hit differently now, too sharp, too sudden. You pull your coat tighter, though not against the cold. You don't really feel cold anymore, not like you used to, just a kind of background discomfort. Like your body's dimly aware something isn't quite right, but can't be bothered to alert you with specifics. And so you sit, watch the river, sip your medicine. Let the hours drift by in soft, dissolving loops. If you look at your reflection in the water, it shifts, sometimes younger, sometimes older, sometimes not there at all. You don't know if it's the laudanum or just your imagination, but it doesn't really matter. Reality, as always, is optional. You keep the bottle close as you wander, half aimless, through the streets that all look alike, narrow, damp, smeared in the dull greys and browns of soot and resignation. Georgian London isn't much for colour, unless you count the splash of crimson from a butcher's apron or the deep yellow of gaslight flickering in a tavern window. The rest is all variations on decay. Every building seems to slump under the weight of its own grime. You pass rows of shops with smudged windows and iron signs overhead, each swinging gently in the morning breeze like they're groaning under the weight of what they sell. You duck into a covered alley for a bit of quiet. Not that quiet really exists here, just muffled sounds. Your boots stick slightly to the damp stones beneath your feet, and there's something dripping nearby, but you don't look to see what. You lean against the wall, feel the rough bricks against your back, and take another small sip from the bottle. The taste is still bitter, metallic and earthy, but now there's something comforting about it. You've grown so used to it that you don't flinch anymore. It's not just medicine, it's flavour, ritual, identity. You think about what's actually in this bottle. You've heard a dozen explanations, some more horrifying than others. The basics are simple enough: alcohol and opium. One part sedation, one part oblivion, shaken together and bottled like salvation. But what else is in there? You've heard whispers: belladonna, henbane, crushed pearls, even snake venom for that extra edge. Apothecaries don't always stick to the same recipe, the strength varies, and sometimes so does your perception of gravity afterward. There's an old chemist down near Chancery Lane who swears by adding a bit of lead powder to stabilise the tincture. You heard of a woman who drank his blend and spent 2 days believing her reflection had been replaced by someone else. She gave away her money to strangers and tried to climb a cathedral. They found her weeping in a graveyard, convinced she'd died 20 years prior. You've never gone to that chemist, though you're not entirely sure you haven't. Memory is fickle these days. When you first discovered laudanum, it was a revelation. You were younger, more hopeful, still under the illusion that your brain was manageable. It came recommended by someone who seemed intelligent. A doctor or a friend of a friend, you can't remember. Just a few drops in tea, they said. Good for nerves, good for digestion, good for the aches in your head that never seem to leave. That first bottle was small, sweet-smelling and carefully measured. You took it with ceremony, you wrote down the effects, you marvelled at the peace. Now, you drink directly from the bottle, no tea, no measuring spoon, the taste no longer matters. The dose is approximate, guided by the muscle memory and desperation. You've gone from science to superstition, small sips if your stomach is churning, larger ones if the light hurts your eyes, and always before sleep, not that sleep comes easy. The line between dreams and memories has thinned into a blur. Sometimes you wake up mid-sentence, unsure if you are speaking to someone or just thinking loudly again. A cat slinks past you in the alley, pausing to stare with yellow eyes that reflect a bit too much in the gloom. It blinks slowly, then continues on, tail flicking like punctuation. You nod at it like your old friends. The animals in this city, you've noticed, always look like they know more than the people. You keep walking, and the city folds around you. Somewhere nearby a violin plays. A real one. Not the screech of practice, but something mournful and skilled. It drifts through the bricks like smoke, softening the edges of your morning. You pause near a window where the sound is loudest and lean in. Behind the glass, you see a man with long grey hair and hunched shoulders, bowing over the strings with religious focus. He doesn't see you. Probably wouldn't care if he did. For a moment you feel something. Not quite sadness, not quite longing, something else. A ghost of yourself, maybe. The you that might have played music or written something people would actually read, or remembered their mother's voice clearly. But it fades as quickly as it came. Another sip, and you're wrapped back in the safe, sleepy fog. It's worth noting that laudanum isn't illegal, not yet, not even frowned upon really. The bottles are sold in respectable shops, and the word addiction hasn't entered polite conversation. You're not a criminal, you're not even considered sick, just perhaps a little melancholic, a touch of nerves, sensitive, poetic if they're being kind, weak-willed if not. In truth, most people of your class and circle are at least a little bit medicated. The wealthy use it to calm themselves after social events or to treat headaches that don't respond to fresh air. Middle-class mothers use it to quiet children or dull the edge of postpartum despair. Even doctors use it, often prescribing it to themselves with impressive generosity. It's as common as bread, but far more dependable. The scary part, there's no real dosage guideline. One man might sleep off 2 ounces. Another might never wake again from half that. Your own tolerance has built up like a wall, one you lean against more and more every day. You've pushed past nausea, past tremors, past the days when skipping a dose meant just feeling a bit unwell. Now it means cold sweats, frantic pacing, the sensation that your bones are trying to crawl out of your skin. Once, during a week when money ran out and charity wore thin, you went almost 3 days without it. On the second night, you bit your own hand just to distract from the crawling sensation behind your eyes. And that's the real hook. Laudanum doesn't just numb pain, it rewrites your relationship to reality. The world softens. Worries feel far away like someone else's problems. It doesn't make you happy. It makes you okay with being unhappy, which in a place like Georgian London feels like a minor miracle. You reach your boarding house again just as the sun peeks weakly through the fog, more a suggestion than a beam. Your landlady glances at you as you shuffle in but says nothing. You pass her a nod that's half apology, half surrender. Back in your room, the air is musty, as if your absence hadn't meant anything to it. The bottle is half empty now. You place it on the rickety nightstand and sit at the edge of your mattress, shoes still on. You think about eating, you think about writing, you think about what day it is, and then you don't think at all. The bread is always stale. You could knock out a man with the crust if you really tried, but it's breakfast, or at least the closest thing you allow to be called breakfast these days. You sit cross-legged on the mattress, hunched over the chipped plate your landlady slid under your door that morning without a word. Half a slice of bread, a wedge of something trying to be cheese, and a cup of lukewarm tea that tastes vaguely metallic. You chew mechanically, your jaw moving out of habit, not hunger. Across from you, your bottle waits patiently. Tincture of opium, laudanum, whatever you want to call it, it's become the uninvited but permanent guest at every meal. You stare at it for a moment, considering. Your hand reaches before your thoughts do. The cork is crusted around the edges, and you yank it free with a practiced twist, bringing the bottle to your lips. Not too much, just enough to make everything settle again. The warmth trickles down your throat and settles low in your stomach, like slipping into a hot bath in a freezing house. You lean your head back and close your eyes, the bread still half chewed in your mouth. Everything around you quiets. The creaking pipes, the wind against the window pane, even the small war between 2 rats in the wall, it all softens into the background. This is your real breakfast. The rest is just pageantry. You reach for your notebook, the one with the peeling leather cover and the ink stains shaped like countries that no longer exist. It lives on the floor beside the bed. Under a pile of discarded waistcoats and forgotten socks, you flip it open to a random page. There's a poem there, or at least it looks like one. The handwriting slants more than usual, curling like ivy. You try to read it, but the words refuse to line up. You can feel the emotion behind it, though. Something said, something beautiful, something deeply dishonest. You've started to realise that most of your writing is like that now, truth adjacent. Fragments of feeling shaped into something that sounds profound but means little. Once, you used to write articles, essays, pieces that were meant to educate or agitate or provoke. But the fire in those words has dimmed, drowned in syrup and sleep. Now you just jot things down to remember that time is still passing. You turn the page and find a sketch of a woman's face. You stare at it for a long time, trying to remember who she is. A muse? A lover? Someone you met once on a train? The detail in the drawing suggests you knew her well, freckles, the small scar above her eyebrow, the twist of her mouth like she's about to say something clever. But her name escapes you. Like most things do lately, laudanum doesn't make you forget in the usual sense. It more like moves memories to the back of the drawer and hides the key. You know the memories are still there, technically, but retrieving them feels like walking through waist-deep fog. Events blend together. Whole weeks go missing. You'll find notes to yourself on scraps of paper, reminders scrawled in the margins of books, names underlined with exclamation points, clues in a mystery you no longer care to solve. You try the cheese, regret it immediately. It's gone sour and leaves an oily smear on your tongue. You wash it down with a sip of tea, but that just adds rust to the flavour profile. Again, your hand drifts to the bottle. One more sip, just to cut through the taste, and to take the edge off your stomach, and your headache, and the crawling sensation behind your eyes, and, well, everything really. Outside your window, the street has woken up fully now. There's a vegetable cart trundling past, the driver shouting prices to no one in particular. A constable leans against a lamp-post, trying to look important while pretending not to be freezing. Children run by screaming, their laughter sounding more like banshees than joy. You watch it all through the warped glass, feeling like you're seeing the world from underwater. This is the part of the day where you sometimes attempt productivity. You consider writing a letter, to whom you're not sure. Perhaps to a family member who thinks you're dead, or a former friend who wishes you were. You pick up your pen and stare at the blank page, waiting for something to come. Nothing does, just the whisper of the wind and the soft hum inside your skull. You lie back on the mattress and stare at the ceiling. There's a brown stain in the corner that's taken on the shape of a dog's face. You've named it Reginald. You talk to him sometimes. Not out loud, of course, you're not that far gone. Yet. But you exchange glances. You imagine what he'd say if he could speak. Probably something about how you should get up, go outside, get some air. But Reginald's judgment is subtle. You appreciate that. The truth is, you don't feel much anymore. Not joy, not grief, not rage. Just a gentle, persistent numbness. It wraps around you like fog, like a blanket pulled up too high. Laudanum doesn't eliminate your problems, it just makes them quieter. Quieter than your own thoughts. Quieter than the world outside. You wonder sometimes what it would feel like to feel again. Then you take another sip and the thought dissolves like sugar in tea. There was a time when you told yourself this was temporary, that you'd wean off it once your nerves settled, once your finances improved, once the winter ended. That was 3 winters ago. Now you barely even remember what normal felt like. Normal is something that happens to other people. People with clean shirts and steady hands and the ability to cry. You hear the landlady's footsteps outside your door. A pause, a sigh. Then they move on. You've missed rent again. You haven't been able to do your editing work in weeks. The manuscript on your desk is half finished and already overdue. The client stopped checking in 2 letters ago. You were once respected in certain circles. Now you're not even mentioned. The bottle's nearly empty now. You shake it gently, hear the soft swish of the last few mouthfuls. You ration it without thinking, just enough to get through the next hour. Maybe 2. You know you'll have to go out again soon. Back to the apothecary. Or to one of the riskier places. There are whispers of stronger mixtures being sold down near the docks. Dangerous stuff, with odd side effects and permanent consequences. But the thought doesn't frighten you. It almost sounds like a vacation. You close your eyes, try to nap. But sleep doesn't come like it used to. It hovers just out of reach, teasing you with the idea of rest without ever fully delivering. You drift instead, into a shallow, swirling dream state, where your thoughts echo and loop and blend into nonsensical vignettes. You see the woman from your sketch. She's holding your notebook, tearing out pages one by one. You try to stop a bit, but your arms are too heavy. Reginald watches from the ceiling, unimpressed. You wake up minutes or hours later with the same thoughts you had before, the same dull ache in your limbs, the same gnawing awareness that you've done nothing today and will likely do nothing tomorrow. You reach for the bottle. Of course you do. And though it's nearly gone, it still gives you enough to survive the moment. Breakfast is over, the fog hasn't lifted. Neither have you. You rarely speak to your neighbours, and they rarely speak to you. It's not a matter of rudeness. It's just that everyone's trying not to be seen too clearly. You all live in the same thin-walled boarding house off Drury Lane, a place that smells perpetually of boiled potatoes and damp wool, where each room feels like a confession booth that nobody's confessing in. Privacy isn't a luxury here, it's a collective agreement. No questions asked, no answers volunteered. Still they notice you, they always notice you. You've become part of the background, but not in the comforting wallpaper sense. More like mould creeping across the ceiling, ignored until it starts dripping. You can feel their eyes on you when you pass in the hallway. Not openly, just little glances held too long, whispered greetings that trail off at the end. You've heard them speaking through the walls, not clearly, but enough to catch a name here or there. Yours, laced with pity and that soft disgust people keep tucked under their coats like a flask. They think you're fragile. That you've had a fall or gone melancholy, or that you're a poet, which apparently is now a medical condition. Some of them blame the city, others blame your type, whatever that means, and a few, if they're being honest, probably just blame the laudanum. But they'll never say that directly. You're still too respectable looking for outright contempt. Take Mrs. Holbrook, the widow in the room 2 doors down. She's always offering you things. Old soup, mending thread, unwanted advice. Her smile is stiff, like it's been pinned to her face for years, and her hands shake when she pours tea. You once heard her tell someone that you're not quite right since your cousin died, which was news to you, seeing as you've never had a cousin. She means well, but it's clear she doesn't want you getting worse within earshot. Then there's Jasper, the painter upstairs, who swears he met Byron once and insists on wearing velvet indoors. He's thin in the way rich men pretend to be, and his fingers are always stained with ink or wine or both. He doesn't look down on you, he just looks through you. You caught him stealing a sip from your bottle once. He smiled and called it communion. You haven't spoken since. The children in the house, God knows who they belong to, don't like you. They call you Fogman when they think you're not listening. Which is fair, you suppose. You do drift more than walk. You often forget your own name in the morning. You wear a coat 3 seasons too heavy, and your eyes are, according to a mirror you don't trust, unnaturally still. Sometimes when you catch sight of yourself, you wonder how long you've been looking like this, but it's hard to pinpoint the moment the change took hold. In truth, the thing that most unnerves them isn't the gauntness or the slow blinking or the bottle, it's your sense. You don't knock on doors, you don't complain about the noise, you don't ask for help, you just all exist. Quietly, persistently. And in London, persistence without direction is almost criminal. You had a friend here once briefly, a man named Elias, who lived in the room opposite yours. He was a former clerk, fallen on hard times, with a limp and a laugh like dry paper. You got along because he didn't ask questions and shared his tobacco. For a while you even spoke about politics, about literature, about the unfairness of things. Then one morning his door was open and the room was empty. No note, no explanation, just gone. Some say he moved to a cousin's in York. Others say he threw himself into the canal. You didn't ask. You didn't want to know which story was kinder. The truth is, people disappear all the time here. They slip out of rooms, out of jobs, out of conversations, and into cracks in the city where no one goes looking. Laudanum is just one of those cracks. Your landlady, Mrs. Griggs, tolerates you in the way landlords tolerate anything that doesn't cry or bleed on the carpets. You suspect she knows, not because she's said anything, but because she hasn't. The rent is late. Often the bottles occasionally fall from your pockets when you stumble up the stairs. You smell like an apothecary floor. Still, she says nothing. Perhaps she had someone like you once, a brother, a son, a husband. Perhaps she's just used to ghosts that still breathe. But make no mistake, if you cause a scene, you're gone. One fit, one bad night of screaming through withdrawal, one unfortunate episode involving window ledges, or fires or hallucinated rats with human faces, and the locks will be changed. She has a cousin, you've heard, who does favours. Favours involving basements and one-way doors. You try to stay quiet. Still the whispers grow louder. You hear your name sometimes, muffled through walls. Him, yes, the one with the tremor. Always tired, never quite awake. Looks like he's been crying even when he hasn't. You want to explain sometimes that you weren't always like this, that there was a time you were sharp, clever, even charming, that you knew how to dress and when to laugh and how to hold a room in the palm of your hand, but that person left. Maybe he packed up one night and boarded a ship. Maybe he shrank into your bones and forgot the way out. You don't remember. What you do remember is the feeling of the first few doses. How it softened everything. How people's voices stopped echoing inside your skull. How you could finally sleep, finally eat, finally breathe without needing to win an internal war first. It was supposed to be temporary, just until you were better, just until you got through the season. Then it became the season, then the year, then a life. The others don't understand. They think you're broken. You're not. You're still in there. You still notice things, the way the gaslight flickers like a heartbeat, the patterns of soot on the floorboards, the soft click of a lock turning down the hall. You still write, even if it's nonsense. You still see beauty, even if it's faded and flickering. You just don't show it. You've learned not to. Showing things leads to questions, and questions lead to doors being closed. So you nod politely when you pass your neighbours. You offer ghost-thin smiles when someone coughs near you. You keep your words minimal, your movements slower than necessary, your bottle tucked inside your coat. You keep to yourself, you remain quiet. But they know. They all know. And you know they know. You've heard of some truly absurd remedies in your time, but the further down the laudanum spiral you go, the stranger they become. Georgian London is a city teetering on the edge of rationality, where Enlightenment science rubs elbows with outright mysticism. And you've become a connoisseur of both. It starts with a simple curiosity born out of desperation. Maybe there's a way to manage the worst parts of addiction, to soften the come down or stop the tremors. But before you know it, you're bleeding into a handkerchief on the floor of a candlelit attic, while someone rubs magnets over your temples and whispers to the moon. Take bloodletting, for example. There's a surgeon just off Bow Street who swears by it. You went once, not because you believed him, but because he promised the fog in your head would lift. His office was crowded with dusty jars and yellowing anatomical drawings pinned crookedly to the walls. He asked no questions, just motioned for you to sit, then tied a length of stained cloth around your arm with an enthusiasm that bordered on cheerful. When the blade came out, it was quick, clinical, a pinch, a release. The blood came dark and sluggish, like it didn't really want to leave. You watched it pool in a chipped porcelain bowl and waited for clarity. It never arrived. The surgeon muttered something about toxic humours and waved a glass of brandy under your nose. You left light-headed, with a damp bandage and a dull ache behind your eyes, but no less haunted. In fact, you walked home slightly tilted, like gravity had been miscalculated. The only thing that seemed to help was the usual, a generous sip from your bottle, right there on the street beneath a gas lamp, flickering like it had a grudge. Then there were the magnets. You met the magnetist at a boarding house gathering you never intended to attend. Someone dragged you there, insisting it would be stimulating. The man introduced himself as Dr. Felix Marlowe, a practitioner of animal magnetism. He wore too much cologne and not enough logic, claimed he could rebalance your vital energies by moving charged stones across your body in deliberate patterns. You laughed, a short dry bark that surprised even you, and he responded by offering a free session. What could you say? You were already a man who consumed poison as medicine. Who were you to judge someone else's snake oil? So you sat, in a room smelling faintly of lavender and wet wool, as he moved 2 polished stones over your chest and head, mumbling under his breath like someone reciting an overdue apology. You felt nothing, except the slight annoyance of having your personal space invaded by a man who believed the stars could cure indigestion. But here's the thing. Part of you wanted it to work. That's the most humiliating part. You wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, one of these strange ideas would lift the weight from your bones, clear the syrup from your thoughts, and let you return to yourself. Not the version everyone sees now, the sunken-eyed ghost, but the one you remember. The one who read for hours, who didn't flinch at daylight, who didn't ration his thoughts between doses. You even tried moonbathing once. It was a trend, briefly, among certain literary types. The idea was simple: walk barefoot under the full moon and let the silver light purify your body and mind. You tried it in a cemetery, of all that places, because where else could you guarantee peace and quiet at midnight? You slipped between the gates with a stolen apple and a warm coat, sat on a stone bench beneath a statue of an angel missing its face, and looked up at the sky like it might speak. It didn't. But you did feel something. Not healing exactly, just stillness. And in a life as fractured as yours, stillness is its own kind of miracle. These fringe remedies have their own ecosystem, pamphlets, underground clubs, a whole whisper network of seekers and sufferers. You once overheard a man at a tea shop insisting that holding a warm potato under your armpit could cure laudanum dependency. Another woman claimed she'd been cured by standing in a circle of chalk and screaming the Lord's Prayer backward. She smelled like mildew and roses. You considered asking her to teach you. Even the newspapers dabble in this madness, often squeezed between ads for wigs and cough syrup. One article argued that addiction wasn't physical at all, but rather a misalignment of the soul caused by impure thoughts and low vibrations. Another posited that laudanum wasn't the problem, you were, that some people simply had weaker moral constitutions and should be whipped back into righteousness. You didn't finish that article. You fed it to the fire and watched the ink curl. The real doctors aren't much better. Half of them are prescribing laudanum as a cure for laudanum addiction. As if smaller doses administered with a posh accent somehow cancel out the damage. You once paid 5 shillings for a tincture that was supposed to wean you off the opium entirely. It tasted like soap and regret, and made you violently ill for 2 days. You ended up crawling back to your bottle with shaking hands and a fresh layer of shame. And so the cycle continues. Still, you collect the nonsense remedies like a child with useless trinkets. Not because you believe in them, but because they remind you that people are trying, that beneath all the grime and cynicism and passive decay, someone still thinks this condition can be cured, that you can be fixed. The cruel joke is that the laudanum itself was once considered a miracle cure. It was sold as salvation in a bottle, a balm for every ill, physical, mental, spiritual. Safe, effective, fast-acting. That's what the apothecaries used to say, and in the beginning they weren't entirely wrong. It does work. It does help. Until it doesn't. Until it becomes the thing you need saving from. You wonder how many others are out there like you, wandering the city in a state of half-wakefulness, trying new rituals, swallowing new potions, whispering to the stars or bleeding into basins, or hoping that this time, this one, will be the thing that finally sets them free. You'd like to meet them, swap stories, maybe laugh about the time you stood in the moonlight hoping for deliverance, maybe cry, maybe just sit in silence and know you're not alone. But addicts make poor company for each other. You're all too busy pretending not to be what you are. So you remain your own patient, your own priest, your own mad doctor, a cabinet of curiosities in one exhausted body. And as the days drip by like medicine from a faulty bottle, you try one ridiculous remedy after another. Not because you believe they'll work, but because the idea that you've already tried everything is just too unbearable to live with. The fog today is especially thick, that heavy kind that settles low and sticks to your skin like wet wool. The buildings loom larger, softened at the edges, their rooftops lost in the grey. It gives the city a strange dreamlike quality, like someone forgot to finish painting it this morning. You've always liked days like this, not because they're beautiful, but because they make your dazed wandering feel less out of place. Everyone's stumbling a little when they can't see 2 feet ahead. You've taken to walking more, not with purpose, not towards anything, just walking, as if moving your body through space might somehow trick your brain into believing you're still part of the world. You pull your coat tighter, fingers brushing the familiar weight of the bottle inside. It clinks gently with each step, a lullaby in glass. The streets are still wet from last night's drizzle. Carriage wheels hiss along the cobblestones, and horse hooves slap through the shallow puddles. The smell of the city is worse in the damp. Coal smoke, sewage, something sour and faintly metallic. But you're used to it. You hardly notice anymore. It's not that your senses have dulled, it's that your brain just doesn't bother reporting the details unless they're dangerous, or beautiful, or new. And let's be honest, none of those things happen much these days. Your feet guide you down familiar routes. Past the grocer with the cracked window, where you once traded a silver pen for a handful of apples, past the pawn shop with the stuffed badger in the window, wearing a monocle, still inexplicably there, year after year, covered in dust and what might be mild contempt, past the alley where you once lay for 3 hours, not sleeping, not moving, just staring at the sky and wondering if it might open. Sometimes the city feels endless. Other times it feels as like a single street folded in on itself forever. Either way, walking helps. You watch the world with dull curiosity, taking in snippets of lives more vivid than your own. 2 dock workers arguing over something in a crate, a boy chasing a dog too fast to catch, a flower seller sneezing violently into her wares. They all pass through your field of vision like actors in a play you forgot auditioning for. You stop at a park, not the usual one, but another, smaller, ringed by black iron railings and half-dead hedges. There's a bench near the centre, empty, slightly damp, but not yet claimed by any of the city's usual ghosts. You sit, let your body settle. Your spine curves like a question mark. You pull out the bottle, take the smallest sip, let it linger on your tongue. The taste is bitter, but familiar. That helps. The trees sway above you, leaves heavy with mellow mist. Their branches look like arms bent in exhaustion. You relate. A soft wind stirs your hair and whispers in your ears, but you can't make out the words. Probably for the best. You've had enough of voices lately. As you sit, you start thinking. Not the big, sweeping philosophical thoughts you used to enjoy, the ones about truth and beauty and what makes a life worthwhile. No, these days your thoughts are narrower, simpler. Where did I put that letter? Did I eat yesterday? What time is it? Should I take more? You don't wear a watch anymore. You pawned it months ago. It had been a gift, something expensive and once meaningful. Now it's probably gathering dust beside someone else's memories. You used to be terrified of losing things, possessions, people, pieces of yourself. Now loss feels like shedding, lighter, cleaner, fewer things to remember, fewer things to miss. Still moments sneak up on you. Like now, when the fog parts just enough to let a slant of grey light fall across your hands and you see the tremor. Just a flutter, a ripple through the fingers, not enough to notice unless you're still. You flex your hand, try to ignore it. That's a dangerous little ripple. It's how you know the dose is wearing off. And once it starts, it doesn't stop. First the twitching, then the cold sweat, then the whispers. And not the poetic kind. You stay seated, hoping the tremor passes on its own. It doesn't. You reach again for the bottle but hesitate. You've been sipping too often lately, less out of need and more out of reflex. It's a habit that builds without you noticing. At first it's just one more to sleep, then it's a little to steady the nerves, then it's just constant. You used to measure your doses. Now you measure your time in how long until the next one. You take a careful mouthful anyway. The shaking slows, the edges blur again. Relief comes like warm oil poured over a frayed rope. Everything tight loosens. You exhale. You could sit here forever, if forever didn't also mean eventually running out. A child walks past the fence, hand in hand with a woman who might be his mother, or might be a governess. He looks at you and his nose wrinkles slightly. It's not disdain, it's confusion. He doesn't know what you are. A gentleman, a tramp, something in between. You're wrapped in a coat with fine buttons but threadbare cuffs. Your boots are scuffed but not falling apart. You look like someone halfway through becoming something else. The child turns away, already bored. You remember being that young, not clearly, but in flashes. Red mittens, a tin whistle, someone's laughter, not yours. The details slip away as soon as they arrive. That's the curse of Laudanum. You don't forget everything. You forget just enough to make remembering hurt. A scholarly debate has floated around in newspapers and salons lately about whether laudanum affects the memory or if it simply distorts the perception of time. Some argue it leaves permanent holes like moths in fabric. Others say the memories are intact but locked away, inaccessible except through dreams or hallucinations. One theory even suggests the drug creates false memories, convincing replicas of events that never happened. The mind, it seems, can be just as opium-soaked as the body. You don't care which theory is right. All you know is that every walk feels both familiar and foreign. Every face might be someone you used to know. Every alley could be the one you stumbled through that night you nearly didn't make it home. And every moment, no matter how ordinary, feels like it's happening behind glass. You rise from the bench slowly. The joints ache. Your back cracks like firewood. You feel older than you are, and you're not that old. At least you don't think so. A man with your teeth shouldn't feel this brittle. You begin walking again, toward what you don't know, just moving. Forward motion, a spell against the stillness. The city unfolds around you again. Its noises, its smells, its indifferent breath. You're not part of it, but you walk through it anyway. There's a certain irony in how much poetry gets written by people who are too sick to live and too tired to die. Your boarding house has no shortage of them. Writers, painters, thinkers, all orbiting the same unremarkable building like flies around a dying candle. You've often wondered if it's the laudanum that draws them, or if people like you are simply born with a weakness, a soft place in the head that makes regular life unbearable. Either way, your hallway smells like ink, sweat, and dreams rotting at room temperature. Tonight, you find yourself in the common room, a place you usually avoid. It's dimly lit and lined with threadbare armchairs that have hosted too many lives. The wallpaper is peeling in slow-motion waves, revealing older, sadder wallpaper beneath it. On the mantel, a clock ticks with a lopsided rhythm, as though even it's lost the will to keep proper time. Someone left a half-full glass of port on the windowsill days ago. No one's touched it. You suspect no one remembers who it belonged to. You take a seat near the hearth, though there's no fire. There hasn't been for weeks. The landlord says coal is too expensive, and anyway, the chill in the room matches the mood of its residents. Across from you, Wilfred is reading a book upside down, and you're not sure if he knows it. He used to be a schoolmaster. Now he wears his dressing gown in public and refers to everyone as you lot. You nod at him. He doesn't nod back. To your left, Miriam is writing furiously in a small notebook, lips moving silently. She's 22 maybe, though she speaks like someone twice her age. She's working on a serial novel, something about ghosts and duels and unrequited love. You've read bits of it, beautiful, haunting stuff, even if she doesn't believe in editing. She once offered you a page in exchange for a spoonful of your laudanum. You tore the page out of your own notebook instead. It felt fair. And then this Julian, the poet. Julian is the type of person who looks like they were born leaning against a windowsill, thinking of something curl and unspeakably clever. His coat is too long, his cheekbones are too sharp, and his voice always sounds like he's telling you something important even when he's asking where the tea is kept. He drinks laudanum like it's communion wine, and claims it opens the doors of perception. You've never had the heart to tell him those doors were already unhinged. He sees you and smiles, slow and knowing. "Out walking again?" he asks, like it's an inside joke. You nod. "And did the fog whisper anything interesting this time?" You shrug. "Only that it wants a raise." Julian laughs, but it's a brittle thing. It's more consistent than I am, at least. You both lapse into silence, which is comfortable. In this house, words are currency and no one's flush with it. The fireless hearth casts long, cold shadows. The air tastes faintly of damp wood and spilled gin. Somewhere upstairs, a door slams, followed by muffled coughing. No one moves to check. You glance down and realise Julian's notebook is open in his lap. He's been writing again. The page is crowded with inky lines, some crossed out, some circled, others scribbled into oblivion. He notices you looking. "Want to hear it?" he asks, already assuming the answer is yes. You nod anyway. He clears his throat dramatically, then reads, "The candle dies, but still the flame persists behind the eye. We live in rooms that have no names and sleep before we die." You blink. It's good. Too good, maybe. You wonder if he just made it up, or if he's been carrying it around for weeks like a hidden bruise. Either way, it lands like a punch. That last line, you say, stings. "Then I'll keep it," he replies, smirking slightly. The sad truth is, most of the people in this room will never be published. Not in the way they dream. Their writing lives on squabs in stained journals, on the backs of grocery lists and eviction notices. Words written at 3 a.m, when the tincture has worn off just enough to make them feel urgent, holy, devastatingly true. And in the morning they're forgotten or dismissed as nonsense. But for that 1 hour, between despair and sedation, there's a kind of clarity you don't get when you're fully awake. Miriam looks up from her notebook. "I dreamed I was dead last night," she says without context. "But I was still trying to meet deadlines," Wilfred snorts. "Even in death go unpaid." You all chuckle, soft and brittle. That's the game. Share a little madness, mask it in poetry, then go back to pretending this is just a phase. You pull out your own notebook, not to show off, but to contribute. It's only fair. You flip to a blank page, then stare at it for a while. Your hand hovers, pen poised, but your brain doesn't move. The words are there, somewhere, tangled and sleepy. But you can't get them out tonight, not without help, Julian notices. You all right? You lie. Just tired. It's not entirely false. You're always tired. In the bones, in the blood, in that deep private part of yourself where dreams used to grow. The truth is, laudanum doesn't make you creative. Not really. It just turns the volume down on the parts of your brain that are screaming. And sometimes in that quiet a sentence appears, a line, a spark, but it never lasts long, and when you wake the next day, all that's left is a few scribbles and the ache behind your eyes. There's a story that goes around, no one knows if it's true, about a writer who took too much one night and wrote the most perfect paragraph of his life. When he sobered up the next day, he couldn't find the paper, tore the place apart looking, never wrote again. You suspect that story's about someone in this very house, maybe even you. You sit in silence for a while longer. Julian's reading again, Miriam's muttering plot points, Wilfred's dozing with his book upside down on his chest. You let your gaze drift. The bottle in your pocket is warm against your thigh, calling but softly. You'll take more tonight. Not too much, just enough to smooth the edges, to pull the blanket a little higher. Maybe then the words will come. Maybe then you'll remember that brilliant line you thought of yesterday. Maybe then you'll stop dreaming of unfinished poems and half-written lives. You rise to leave. Julian looks up. Sleep well, he says. You nod. Not likely, but you'll try. Word of mouth in this city travels faster than any carriage ever could, and the whispers are always ahead of you. That's how you first heard of the penny dreadful pharmacist. Not his real name, of course. No one seems to know that. But it's what people call him, with a mix of fear and fondness, like he's both villain and saviour in one. His shop isn't listed in any directory, and his door has no sign. You only find him if someone tells you where to look, and only if you seem desperate enough to need him. And lately you've begun to look very desperate indeed. The tremors have come earlier each day. The bottle runs out faster, even though you're trying to ration. The usual apothecary mixture barely scratches the surface now. You've considered doubling the dose, but something in you, something old and flickering, whispers that this is a bad idea, that there's a threshold you don't want to cross. But the ache behind your eyes and the twisting in your gut say otherwise. So when Julian offhandedly mentions the man who sells a richer tincture, your ears perk up despite yourself. Penny dreadful, you ask? Julian shrugs as if that's enough. Sells to theatre people and poets. Claims it's purer or stronger or something. You didn't hear it from me. Of course you did. So tonight, after the fog rolls in and the streets quiet to a dull hum, you slip out the door and begin walking towards Shoreditch, where rumour says the shop might be. The journey is long and strange, taking you through neighbourhoods that seem to exist in a time outside time. Gaslights flicker like blinking eyes. The air smells faintly of oil, meat pies, and wet iron. You pass a man selling pamphlets about the devil's involvement in hay fever and another screaming about moon conspiracies. You fit right in. Eventually, you reach a narrow alley that looks like the kind of place where sanity goes to be pickpocketed. The buildings lean in close like gossiping drunkards. You hesitate, then step inside. At the far end is a crooked green door with a single candle flickering in the window. It doesn't look like a shop, it barely looks like a building, but something about it pulls you forward. You knock once, no answer, then again. Finally the door creaks open. A bell doesn't chime, there's just a low groan, as though the wood is tired of being touched. A man stands behind the counter, early 40s maybe, thin but not sickly. He wears a waistcoat that was probably expensive once though, now it's missing buttons. His sleeves are rolled up, exposing pale arms covered in ink smudges and burn marks. His eyes are clear and deeply unsettling. "You're not here for cough syrup," he says, without a trace of humour. "No," you reply. He studies you like a taxidermist choosing his next subject. Then he nods toward a small wooden stool. "Sit," quietly. You do as you're told. The shop is cramped, almost claustrophobic, filled with odd bottles and unlabelled drawers. Some of the jars contain ingredients you recognise: valerian root, poppy extract, oil of clove. Others look like things that should not be preserved in glass. Strange organs, perhaps, or overly confident fungi. A small black cat watches you from a perch above the shelves. Its tail twitches like it's judging your soul and finding it disappointing. The man begins mixing something without speaking. He uses a mortar and pestle made of stone, and his movements are slow but exact. You watch as he adds a dark red powder, then something that smells like burnt sugar, then a clear liquid that steams on contact. The final ingredient is, of course, opium. Thick, black, sticky. It clings to the spoon like regret. He pours the finished product into a dark green bottle and hands it to you. 2 drops, he says. No more. The first time. You nod. You will absolutely not listen. Pay what you can, he adds, already turning away. You place a few coins on the counter. More than you'd usually spend, less than it's worth. He doesn't look at them. As you step back into the street, you feel the weight of the new bottle in your coat. It feels heavier than the others. Alive, somehow. You walk quickly, not wanting to linger in the alley longer than necessary. The fog wraps around your ankles and your breath comes out in little white ghosts. Back at the boarding house, the door creaks open quietly. Most of the residents are asleep. You climb the stairs without your usual sluggishness, almost excited. It's a strange feeling. You haven't felt anticipation in a long time. You sit on your bed, light a candle and study the bottle. It has no label. The glass is slightly warped, like it was blown in a hurry. You uncork it and take a cautious sniff. It smells stronger, earthier, with a metallic edge. 2 drops, he said. You pour 3 into a spoon? Because of course you do. The taste is sharper than your usual blend. Less syrupy, more acrid. It burns the roof of your mouth for a moment before settling into that warm, familiar glide down your throat. You lean back, waiting. At first, nothing. Then everything. Your body loosens. Not just the limbs. Everything. Thoughts slip their leashes. Time folds inward. You feel as if you're floating just above your skin, watching yourself with detached affection. The room breathes. The wallpaper ripples slightly, like the whole building is exhaling. Your notebook lies open on your lap. You don't remember opening it, but your hand is moving, pen scratching across the page, and words are forming. Long sentences that make sense as you write them, even if you won't remember them in the morning. It feels like poetry, but it feels like remembering something that hasn't happened yet. And then come the colours. Not hallucinations, exactly. More like enhancements. The candle's glow is no longer just yellow. It's honey, and gold, and memory. Shadows stretch in soft, slow arcs. The clock ticks in rhythm with your heartbeat. Even the rats in the walls seem to have quieted out of respect. You could stay here forever, but deep inside you know this is the different kind of danger. The usual laudanum leaves you in a fog. This brings clarity, which means the fall will be worse. Clarity is addictive in its own right. For a brief moment you feel like you again awake, articulate, almost radiant. And then, just as quickly, you feel something else. Dread. Because you're going to need this version of the drug now. Your body will demand it. Your tolerance will rise. And when you run out, and you will run out, you'll crash harder than ever before. But tonight, none of that matters. Tonight, the words are flowing. Your hand moves without pause. You are brilliant. You are beautiful. You are doomed. And the bottle glows like a lighthouse in the fog. You wake in a position no human body should voluntarily assume, half sitting, half slumped, neck twisted like a dropped puppet. The candle on your desk has long since burned down, leaving behind a warped wax carcass and a smear of soot up the wall. The notebook lies open in your lap, covered in ink stains, and what may or may not be your own handwriting. You stare at the lines but can't decipher any of them. The letters crawl like ants. Your eyes won't focus. You blink slowly, and that's when you notice it. The pain, not sharp, not immediate, but creeping. A deep ache in your spine, a low thrum in your skull, and a pulsing tightness in your chest, like your lungs are trying to knit themselves together after being stretched too far. It's a familiar feeling, but worse this time. That new tincture, whatever was in it, has left a deeper hole in you. You reach for the bottle. It's still on the table, still heavy enough to save you just for now, but your hand trembles as it closes around the glass. The tremors are earlier than usual today, more aggressive. You're sweating too, but it's cold, clammy sweat, the kind that makes your clothes stick to your skin and your hair to your neck. You try to stand, but your knees buckle. Your body is caught in that grotesque limbo between overdose and withdrawal, like being sick in your own skin. You sink to the floor slowly. like a man being lowered into his grave with entirely too much ceremony. You sit. Relief comes slowly this time. Not the usual rush, not that warm surge that used to feel like a blanket pulled up to your chin. No, now it's a dull easing, like the tide reluctantly pulling back after crashing a little too hard. You wipe your mouth with the back of your sleeve and lie there on the wooden floor for a while, staring at the ceiling and listening to the world creak around you. The wood above your head groans with footsteps. Someone's moving upstairs. The children laugh somewhere down the hall. A teacup rattles against its saucer. All these sounds, normally so distant, now feel sharp and invasive. Your senses are peeled raw, your nerves twitching like exposed wires. Every noise carries the potential to unravel you. You close your eyes and try to breathe slowly. You can't remember what day it is. That in itself is not unusual, but this time the uncertainty carries weight. You're supposed to meet someone, aren't you? Or maybe you were meant to deliver a manuscript or attend a doctor's appointment. You try to piece together yesterday, the walk, the alley, the pharmacist, the taste, the glow, and then nothing. You check your pockets. There's a slip of paper folded tightly and soaked through with some kind of oil. You open it carefully. A receipt? No, just your own scrawl, looping and jagged. It reads, "If this is Tuesday, go back." Go back where? To the shop, to your bed, to a version of yourself that's already lost? You're not ready for another dose, not yet. You know that much. You feel like your organs have been soaked and wrung out. Your stomach lurches, and you gag once, twice, but nothing comes up. Not that there's anything in there to bring up. You haven't eaten since whenever. It's all just tincture and tea and the occasional crust of bread you've stared at for too long before realizing it's molded. You make it to your feet eventually, move toward the basin in the corner and splash cold water on your face. The reflection that meets you in the mirror looks hollowed out and wet at the edges. Your eyes are red, rimmed with shadows, and your lips are cracked. You look like a man who's been trying to escape something but has forgotten what. This is what withdrawal feels like now, not the drama of shaking limbs and screams in the night. That comes later. This is the early phase, the ache, the fog, the quiet panic. The sense that your body is about to betray you in some creative new way. Your heartbeat is uneven, your joints feel hot and swollen, your teeth ache. How do teeth ache? You pace the room, one foot after the other, like a man caged, which frankly you are. The room is too small, too warm, too loud. You open the window and let in the city's cold breath. It helps, a little. The air smells like coal and piss and roasted chestnuts. A scent you might once have found offensive now smells like survival. You think about not taking another dose today, just to see, just to test the waters. You've done it before, briefly, it never ends well, but you cling to the idea that maybe this time will be different. Maybe your body will surprise you. Maybe you'll be stronger now, but already your hands itch for the bottle. You try to distract yourself. You dress slowly, each button an ordeal. You find a scarf buried under your cot and loop it around your neck, even though you're sweating. You tell yourself you'll go for a walk, just a short one, clear your head. Maybe find some food that isn't liquefied despair in a glass bottle. The thought is laughable. You step outside, the street feels unfamiliar. Brighter somehow, though the sky is overcast. Everything seems too loud. A woman argues with a vendor in a dialect you can't place. A dog barks. A cart rattles by, pulled by a horse that looks nearly as tired as you. You flinch at every sound, your nerves taut and humming. You walk anyway, one foot, then the next. You pass a group of men outside a tavern laughing too hard. One of them stares at you a moment too long. You speed up, turn a corner, keep walking, don't stop. You feel the bottle in your coat like a heartbeat. You find yourself outside the apothecaries shop, the regular one, Mr. Penrose's, your safe place, your anchor. You don't go in, you just stand there staring at the sign. You wonder how many times you've stood in this exact spot. Dozens? Hundreds? You imagine the cobblestones beneath you carrying the imprint of your souls. You wonder if Penrose knows what he's doing to people, or if he even cares, or if he's just another cog in the great grinding wheel of this city's quiet destruction. You think about going back to the Penny Dreadful man, getting more of the good stuff, the real stuff, the stuff that made the room bloom with colour and possibility. But you remember the crash, the hollow ache, the bleeding gums and the metallic taste in your mouth that wouldn't go away. You don't know what to do, so you sit on a bench, hands in your lap. Bottle unopened, not yet, not yet. A child runs past, a bell rings, somewhere nearby a violin plays a mournful tune, and you, slowly unveiling, sit still in the middle of the storm. The Royal Society would never invite you through its front door, let alone into one of their discussions on the opium problem. You wouldn't pass the coat check, but that doesn't stop you from reading about their debates second-hand, when the journals are passed around your boarding house or left behind in cafes by men with neater shoes and straighter spines. There's always an article, usually buried behind breakthroughs in steam propulsion or botanical classification, that dares to explore the phenomenon of laudanum dependency, though of course they'd never call it addiction. That word still feels too vulgar, too working class. You're simply afflicted, a little too sensitive, a mind turned inward by genius and grief. The society men argue about you in their high-backed chairs, sipping sherry and avoiding eye contact with the real problem. One article describes dependency as a regrettable outcome of an otherwise miraculous compound. Another blames inherited weakness of nerve. One even suggests that those who become dependent on laudanum may be constitutionally inclined toward moral erosion. You read that one twice, then folded the page into an origami rat and left it on your landlord's windowsills. It's absurd, of course. The men at those meetings have never had to choose between shivering through a night or pawning their boots. They've never sat in a freezing room, skin-crawling, listening to their own teeth click together like dice in a cup. They prescribe from behind polished desks, far away from the streets where people like you live, where a strong enough dose of the right tincture is the difference between being able to button your shirt or collapsing halfway through. They've never had to weigh their humanity against 5 millilitres of syrup in a stained bottle, but they write about it anyway. They gather in candlelit chambers with elaborate Latin names and pretend their theories are acts of mercy. They speak in hushed, thoughtful tones about dosage thresholds and physiological thresholds, about how women seem to succumb faster than men, perhaps due to their smaller frames or weaker wills. Some even muse aloud about whether creativity itself is linked to susceptibility, whether the price of genius is simply a slow poisoning. You've met men like that, the kind who touch your arm too familiarly and say things like, "Well, I do admire your courage in confronting your condition," as if you were battling a mild rash rather than your own nervous system. They offer you pamphlets written in trembling cursive about the power of will and the benefits of fresh air. One man, a university professor, once told you to simply try skipping your evening dose. The mind is stronger than the body, after all. You wanted to laugh in his face, but instead you vomited on his shoes. Close enough. There's a sharp divide, you've noticed, between those who speak of laudanum and those who know it. The former talk in metaphors and medical terms, the latter speak in glances and half-finished sentences. You recognize each other instantly. There's a look, an almost imperceptible softness around the mouth, a delay between question and answer, the way the eyes flinch slightly at bright light or sudden movement. You've had entire conversations with fellow users without ever naming the thing that binds you. You just sit near each other, pull your coats tighter, and try to avoid breathing too loudly. Sometimes you wonder what it would be like to stand before those Royal Society panels, dishevelled, shaking, and say, "Here's what your medicine does. Here's what your miracle cure costs. Here is what I've become for the sake of your debates." But you never will, because people like you don't get invited. You're part of the experiment, not the discussion. Still, you read their pamphlets. You read them late at night when the rest of the house is asleep and your thoughts are too loud. You underline sentences with bitter amusement. Patient exhibits signs of emotional dullness. Long-term users may experience intermittent hallucinations. Recovery is possible through strict adherence to medical regimen and moral clarity. You write in the margins, define moral clarity. You keep these scraps in a small box under your bed, along with a few letters you'll never send, a broken pair of spectacles, and a photograph of someone you can't quite place. A woman, maybe. She's smiling in a way that makes your chest ache. You take the box out sometimes and sort through it, as if the pieces might rearrange into something resembling coherence. They never do. One paper, more progressive than most, suggests that laudanum is not the evil, but the world that necessitates it. That poverty, illness, grief, and expectation carve holes in people, and the drug merely fills them, temporarily, imperfectly, but with enough precision to feel like an answer. That article didn't make it into circulation. You only found it because someone had used it to wrap a wedge of cheese. Still, it stayed with you, because it felt true. Not completely, but enough to sting. There's a man you used to know, Thomas, who tried to quit. He was a teacher, kind-eyed, spoken in metaphors even when ordering coffee. Said he was going cold turkey. Said he'd found a method. He lasted 9 days. On the 10th, he was found muttering to himself in a stairwell, convinced that birds were living in his teeth. You visit him at St. James Infirmary, but he didn't recognise you. Just stared past you, murmuring a poem in a language that didn't exist. The Royal Society doesn't mention the Thomas, or people like him. Your statistics, case studies, footnotes. They write as if your struggle is happening somewhere else, cleanly, clinically, behind glass. But the reality is messier. It's the half-finished letters, the holes in the floorboards from pacing, the borrowed coats, the hiding of bottles behind bookshelves, the shame of being loosed enough to know what's happening, but too far gone to stop it. One afternoon you came across a street preacher shouting about the sin of idleness. He wore a tattered robe and held a sign that read, "The body is a temple, not a tavern." You watched him for a while, sipping quietly from your flask. He never looked directly at you, but when he started coughing, doubling over with the strain of his own voice, you wondered what he took for the pain. Laudanum, probably. Everybody does. You walked away before he finished his sermon. Now, back in your room, you light a candle and set one of the Royal Society journals on your lap. You read through a paper titled A Moral Examination of Opiate Dependency Among Urban Clerks. You don't finish it. Instead, you write something in your notebook. They study the rats. We live in the maze. You underlined it 3 times. Later that night, the withdrawal hits hard again. Your legs twitch, your spine contracts, your hands curl like dried leaves. You give in, take your measured dose, wait for the storm to pass. You've become a professional storm watcher, a one-man weather station for internal ruin. The Royal Society will never see this. But if they did, you know exactly what they'd say. Fascinating, tragic, self-inflicted. At first you think it's just the usual flicker, your mind playing with shadows again. It happens sometimes, especially in the quiet hours when the street noise fades and your room becomes a box of silence. You're used to seeing shapes in the corner of your eye, movement where there isn't any, the occasional whisper from the walls, though it's usually just the wind, or rats dragging something unfortunate under the floorboards. But this time it's different. This time the rats are speaking, and worse, they're polite about it. It begins slowly, a rustling near the dresser, nothing unusual. Then a small tapping like claws on wood. You glance over, expecting to see a tail disappearing behind a boot or a flicker of fur darting through the crack under the floor. But instead you see 2 beady eyes reflecting the candlelight just peeking out from beneath your coat. The rat doesn't run, it just watches you. Calm, too calm. "Terribly sorry to intrude," it says, in a voice as clear as any you've heard, a little squeaky but refined. "I know it's rather late." You freeze, tea halfway to your lips. For a long moment, you're certain you've finally crossed over into full madness. Not the gentle fuzziness you usually live in, but real clinical white coat madness. But then the rat continues, brushing its whiskers with the tip of a paw. You've dropped quite a bit of bread under the bed, you know. Not that we're complaining. You don't move, you don't breathe, you slowly lower the cup. Your heart is making a sound you didn't know hearts could make, like a moth trying to claw its way out of a drawer. The rat looks up at you. Its eyes are intelligent, unsettlingly so. "Are you all right? You seem unwell." You consider several options. Screaming, fainting, fetching your bottle. Instead, you clear your throat and say, "Did you just talk?" The rat nods. "We don't usually, but you've been rather consistent with your offerings. We thought it only fair." You blink, then blink again. Harder. The rat is still there, still speaking. And now there's another one beside it, smaller, less polite, wearing what looks like a tiny scrap of lace on its head. "Don't encourage him," the second rat says. "He'll never shut up." You are hallucinating, you know this. On some intellectual level, you understand that this is your brain misfiring, conjuring absurd theatre to distract from the ache in your spine and the crawling sensation beneath your skin, and yet, the part of you that has surrendered to laudanum, the part that lives in dreams and crumbling notebooks, leans in. "Do you need something?" you ask, already wondering what kind of man asks rodents if they're in need. "Just conversation," says the first. It's rare to find a human who listens. They climb onto the edge of your rug, careful, respectful. like guests who know not to touch the good furniture. You lean back in your chair watching them. The smaller one sniffs your boot with disapproval. You glance at the bottle on the desk. It's not full, but it's not empty either. Should I be worried? You ask aloud. The first rat shrugs. That depends. We're not here to hurt you. We just thought, since you've been so generous with the crumbs and company, we'd return the favour. The favour being clarity. You laugh, though it comes out more like a wheeze. From rats. Everyone gets a guide, the rat says, a little indignant now. Some get angels, some get ghosts. You get rats. The smaller one nods, chewing something. Better than pigeons, filthy creatures. You're not sure whether to be offended or amused. You're not even sure what reality you're currently occupying. You glance out the window. The street below is empty, lit by one sad gaslight flickering in the mist. The fog presses up against the glass like a curious onlooker. Everything outside feels too distant. Everything inside feels too close. The rats start talking about your habits. How you take your dose earlier now, how you've stopped reading, how your journal entries have gone from poetry to single-word confessions. They're not cruel, just observant. You used to write about love, the polite one says. You flinch. You remember that poem, he continues, the one about the girl with the bell around her ankle? No, you lie. She laughed like rain. Your throat tightens. The hallucination is too precise, too accurate. You wrote that line years ago, before the fog settled in, before the shakes and the pacing and the terrible quiet that now lives in your chest. You'd forgotten about her. Or maybe just buried her in syrup. The rats pause. We're not here to shame you, says the smaller one, but you've got to stop lying to yourself. It's getting boring. Why now, you ask? Why talk now? Because you're close to the edge, the first says, and the edge, as it turns out, talks back. You sit with that, not scared anymore, not even surprised, just tired. The rats climb down. The polite one pauses at the base of the wall and turns back. You'll see more of us, not just us, others. The longer you hover, the thinner the line gets. Try not to be too alarmed. And try not to throw books, adds the smaller one, and they're gone. You sit in the silence afterward, waiting for your brain to correct itself. It doesn't. There's no aftershock, no surge of panic, just a steady hum beneath your skin and the echo of those tiny voices. You look down at your notebook, flip to a clean page, you write, "They spoke to me tonight," then draw two tiny rat silhouettes beside it. Is it madness? Yes. Is it the laudanum? Also yes, but it feels truer than most things have felt lately. You've missed rent again. You didn't mean to. In fact, you distinctly remember planning to pay it this time. You set aside the money, well, most of it, after pawning that silver-handled cane you were never elegant enough to walk with. The coins jingled in your pocket for 3 whole days, which must be some kind of record. And then, one evening, with the fog thick and your bones misfiring and your reflection blinking out of sync, the bottle got a little too light, and the apothecary's door felt a little too inviting. And just like that, rent became theory. Mrs. Griggs, your landlady, does not live in the theoretical. She is a woman of practical decisions and floral aprons that smell of vinegar. She doesn't knock anymore. She thuds. You're eating a slice of bread so stale it threatens to snap a molar when the noise hits your door like a police raid. You freeze mid-bite. For a brief mad second you consider pretending not to be in, but there's nowhere to hide in your room. No closet, no real furniture to duck behind. It's just you, your bed, your desk, your increasingly judgmental mirror, and a growing collection of empty bottles that clink together like guilty chimes. The door thuds again. "Mr. L..." She snaps. "Not in the mood today." You stand, smoothing your shirt like that'll make any difference, and open the door with the kind of caution usually reserved for wild animals and unpaid debt collectors. She stands there, arms crossed, lips pressed into a line so thin it might not exist. Behind her, as promised, is her cousin. You've never met him before, but he looks exactly how you imagined. Thick neck, moustache like a broom, shoulders built for hauling or hurling. "Ah," you say, because the alternative is screaming. Mrs. Griggs wastes no time. "3rd week in a row, you've promised. Twice. I'm done, Mr. L. You nod very slowly. Understandable. Entirely. "I'm sure you're very sorry," she continues, "but sorry doesn't heat water. Sorry doesn't pay for coal. Sorry doesn't fix the smell coming from your floorboards, which I am certain is not just soup. You glance back into your room, where something probably dead is fermenting under your bed. It was soup. Once. Her cousin clears his throat, a deep rumble that suggests he's warming up for property removal. You feel like a very small man in a very large world suddenly. You could explain, of course. You could say you've had a bad month, that you're ill, that the fog has been worse, that you had to choose between rent and not convulsing in your sleep. But those stories have been spent. You're out of pity credit. I can pay, you blurt. Just not today, but tomorrow, or the next day, soon. There's work coming. Mrs. Griggs doesn't blink. Work doesn't come to men who sleep until 3 and talk to rats. You stiffen. So you've heard about that, you say. Everyone's heard about that. The cousin finally speaks. He's got until Friday, then we come back, and we bring rope. You don't want to know what the rope is for. Mrs. Griggs softens just a fraction. You're not a bad man, but I'm not running a charity. I've got mouths to feed. Real ones. You nod again. You've gotten good at nodding. She leaves. Her cousin lingers just long enough to look around your room and sneer at the copy of Milton on your nightstand. You close the door behind them and let your forehead rest against the wood for a few long breaths. You're running out of lifelines. The next hour is a blur of anxious pacing and bottle rummaging. You count your coins, 8 pence and some lint, and check the pockets of every jacket you own. Nothing. You even check the lining of your mattress. As if past you might have hidden something wise and golden there, but past you was a drunk with a pen and a flair for exaggeration. All you find is a dead moth and a folded receipt from a bakery that no longer exists. You stare out the window. The street is alive, uncaring. A man pushes a cart of eels. A woman is laughing too loudly at something invisible. Somewhere a bell rings. None of it involves you. You are no longer part of the city's rotation. You're stationary debris. But the threat of eviction oddly awakens something. Not resolve, nothing so noble. Just a twitch of desperation, a hint of that old hustle. The part of you that used to know how to survive without leaning on a bottle like a crutch carved from ghosts. You decide to find money. It's a ridiculous plan. You have no prospects, no patrons, no talent anyone currently pays for. But you leave the house anyway, jacket on, scarf wrapped, the bottle tucked just out of reach in your coat. You need your hands free for this. You walk to Covent Garden. It's still early, and the street performers haven't begun their dramas. You head to the cafes, the ones with heavy doors and men who read newspapers like they're decoding God. You see a few familiar faces, men who once invited you to salons, to parties, to readings. Now they barely meet your eyes. You could ask to borrow, you could flatter, you could beg, but your dignity is the only thing you haven't sold. You end up at a publishing house you once submitted essays to. The editor, Mr. Carrow, recognizes you just long enough to frown. "Good Lord," he says, "you're still alive," and you smile. "On most days." He doesn't offer a seat. "What do you want?" "Work," and he laughs, actually laughs, then catches himself. "You're serious." "I'm desperate." "Better," he says, "but not employable." You leave with nothing but a bruised ego and the sound of a door closing just a bit too loudly behind you. You try 3 more places, 1 bookseller, 1 pamphlet printer, and a disreputable magazine office run by a man who once published your satire and now insists you owe him a drink. None of them bite. By dusk, your shoes are soaked through, your fingers are numb, and your stomach is louder than your thoughts. You spend your last 8 pence on a bowl of fish stew that may have predated the monarchy. It's hot and tastes like brine and hope. You wolf it down in 2 bites. Back in your room, you collapse onto your bed fully clothed. You've failed. Again. You take out the bottle. You don't even hesitate this time. Just uncork, tip, and drink. The fog returns, not the outdoor kind, but the blessed internal version. The kind that wraps your bones in gauze and lets your thoughts curl up like sleeping cats. The ache in your back eases. The shame in your chest softens. Everything feels far away. You dream of your landlady again. She's holding a ledger and frowning. Only now her cousin has grown to 12 feet tall and is dragging you by the ankle through the streets, shouting something about unpaid metaphors. You wake in the middle of the night to the sound of footsteps outside your door. They pause, then continue on. You breathe in, out, and whisper to the darkness, "Friday." You don't believe in ghosts, at least not in the floating sheet chain-rattling Victorian parlour room sense, but you've noticed they're everywhere lately. Not just the ones hiding in alleyways or staring out from fogged windows, but the kind that sit at the foot of your bed at 4 a.m. and ask very politely why you haven't done anything with your life. You're haunted, not by spirits perhaps, but by the version of yourself you might have been if Laudanum hadn't stepped in and rearranged the furniture in your brain. And then, of course, there's the séance. You weren't planning to attend, no one plans to attend a séance really. It just sort of happens to you, like rain or love or unpaid rent. But when Julian came knocking, eyes wide and pupils too large, whispering about a table that speaks and a medium who channels regret, it sounded just ridiculous enough to fill your evening. Plus, he said there'd be sherry. The gathering is held in a candlelit drawing room on the second floor of a house that smells like lavender, books and secrets. A woman named Miss Rowena leads the session. She wears a deep red velvet gown and enough pearls to strangle a bishop. Her voice is slow and melodious, the kind of voice that makes you believe anything is possible if it's said softly enough. Please, everyone, place your hands upon the table, she says, her eyes already half closed. The spirits are listening. The table is round, polished oak, and far too small for the group that has dissembled. 8 of you in all, each hunched over like conspirators in some elaborate fraud. You recognise some of the faces, writers, artists. At least one man you're pretty sure owes you money. No one makes eye contact. That's how these things work. You must pretend it's not embarrassing to sit in a circle and whisper to the dead. Miss Rowena begins to hum, not a tune exactly, more of a low drone, like a distant kettle boiling. The candles flicker. You feel something brush your ankle, hopefully a breeze, possibly a polite rat returning for a chat. Is there anyone among us who wishes to speak with a departed soul, she asks. Julian clears his throat. My sister. Everyone turns. You didn't know Julian had a sister. He never mentioned her before, not once in all your hours together. The room goes still. Even the draught seems to pause. Miss Rowena nods gravely. We shall call to her. You half expect her to whip out a trumpet or start shaking violently, but instead she just lowers her head and begins to whisper. The words are unintelligible. Something between a prayer and a grocery list. The table begins to tremble. You glance around. No one's moving. The table is. Your rational brain suggests magnets, or wires, or 2 people under the floorboards yanking ropes with tremendous finesse. But another part of you, a quieter, foggier part, leans in. The candlelight warps the shadows on the wall. The air smells suddenly of cloves and roses and ash. Miss Rowena opens her eyes, and they don't quite look like hers anymore. She says you should have burned the letters, she murmurs. Julian goes pale. You've never seen him speechless. She says you kept them in the red box, under your bed. Stop, he says. She says the one about the orchard was never meant for your eyes. Stop. But she doesn't. The words keep coming faster, like floodwater through a broken dam. Secrets spill into the room. Not just Julian's, someone else's mother's death, a painter's lost child. Your own name is spoken once, softly. The hair on your arms stands up. She says the bottle won't work forever, Miss Rowena adds, eyes locked onto yours. She says you'll chase the ghost until it turns around. You flinch, then silence. The candles snuff out one by one. No wind, no movement, just dark. Someone laughs, nervous. Someone else mutters that they've been tricked. Miss Rowena slumps over the table like a marionette with its strings cut. Julian gets up and leaves without a word. You stay seated, fingers numb against the wood, trying to remember how to breathe properly. Later in the hallway, you find the hostess and ask, quietly, casually, if Miss Rowena is legitimate. She used to be, the hostess says, before her husband drank himself into the Thames. After that, she got better. You nod as if that explains anything. On the walk home, the streets feel oddly hollow, like the buildings are only pretending to be solid. You pass a man in a long coat arguing with a lamppost and a woman painting words onto the pavement with what might be wine. You feel right at home. Your room greets you with its usual mustiness. The rats are quiet tonight. Perhaps they're giving you space. You pour yourself a small dose, smaller than usual. You tell yourself it's because you want clarity, but really you're afraid of what more might bring. As the laudanum settles in, the walls don't ripple. No voices whisper. No ghosts appear. Just stillness. You lie on your bed, eyes half open, thinking about the séance. Not whether it was real, but whether it mattered. Maybe that's the trick. Maybe all belief is performance, and all performance is a kind of belief. You drift off somewhere between skepticism and surrender. In your dream, your sister is there. Except you don't have a sister. She's sitting at the edge of your bed holding a red box. You kept them all, she says, smiling. You wake with tears on your face and no memory of why. The journal appears sometime after midnight, tucked beneath your door like a guilty letter. You find it on your way to the basin, barefoot, dazed and shivering. Not from cold, but from that peculiar internal weather that creeps in when the laudanum wears off too fast. You almost miss it. Stepping right over the leather cover, soft from use, its edges curling like dried leaves. At first you assume it belongs to Julian, or Miriam. Or perhaps one of the children has taken to chronicling the strange rituals of the house, and decided your room was the next site of investigation. But then you open the cover, and your name is written inside, your full name, in your own handwriting, which is alarming, because you don't remember owning this book. The pages are filled, densely, chaotically, line after line of slanted script, drawings in the margins, crossed out sentences, little bursts of Latin and dates you don't recognise. It looks like you wrote it while fleeing something. Some of the ink is smudged, as if written with trembling hands. Others are too precise, too clean, like you were channeling someone smarter, more focused, less broken. You sit on the edge of your bed and begin to read. March 12th, the fog has a flavour now, bitter almonds, noted. March 14th, I saw her again, on the bridge. Her coat was green. I'm not certain she exists. March 20th. I've developed a theory. I am not dreaming. I am being dreamed. Someone else is asleep, and I am the nightmare they cannot escape. You flip ahead. April 3rd. Tried to stop. Lasted 6 hours. My legs think they belong to someone else. The bed was made of teeth. I need less poetry in my metaphors. The handwriting shifts halfway through the book, gets tighter, more frantic. The ink is darker. There are ink blots like blood spatters. May 19th. I've discovered the others. They live in the wall. They speak in coughs. I think they're waiting for something. May 20th. I answered them. You pause, look around. The wall is still. The rats are, as always, observing from the shadows with the quiet judgment of creatures who've seen it all before. You flip further ahead, hands sweating now, breath tight. June woke up beside the Thames. Coat missing, one boot, bottle empty, still breathing. Considered whether this qualifies as a success. June 15th. Spoke to a policeman about addiction. He told me to eat an orange and walk it off. England in a nutshell. You laugh, quiet, surprised, bitter. You don't remember writing any of this, but it's unmistakably you. Your rhythm, your sarcasm, your strange affection for analogies no one else would ever understand. Then somewhere near the back there's a page with just one sentence. If you're reading this, it means you've started to forget again. You drop the journal. Your hands are shaking, not the normal tremor, but something deeper, like your blood just remembered something you didn't want it to. You pick it back up, slower this time. Keep reading. There is no cure, but there is a rhythm. Keep the rhythm and you can function. Break it, and you'll forget things again. You'll lose days. You'll lose names. You'll lose faces you once loved. Here is the rhythm, and then a list, times, doses, meals, walks, reminders. A map of your own unraveling, meticulously tracked. You once treated your addiction like a science experiment. You were so sure you could manage it that if you just stayed organized, it couldn't consume you. The idea makes you laugh now, a dry, hollow laugh. Laudanum doesn't care about lists. It doesn't care about good intentions or bullet points or self-help metaphors. Still, you read every line. You find your own notes about apothecaries, which shops sold diluted tinctures, which ones added extras to improve flavour or deepen the sleep. You wrote about the penny dreadful pharmacist too. He warned me, to be fair. Said it would make the world too bright to look at. I didn't listen. I never listen. You close the journal, stare into the darkness. You are now a man who leaves himself breadcrumbs through the forest of his own mind. That would be romantic if it weren't so deeply pathetic. The saddest part, Some of it is beautiful, not just the handwriting or the metaphors or the little ink drawings, birds in flight, a violin, a pair of hands reaching for something, but the language, the hope, buried like seeds in the margins. You find a page where you wrote in big letters, "I am not done." You want to believe that. You want to believe it with a desperation that aches in your teeth. But then the withdrawal crests again. Your muscles twitch. Your skin feels wrong. The floor tilts. You reach for the bottle. You stop, then you reach again. Because even now, even after rediscovering your own madness catalogued in a leather-bound time capsule, you're still a body with a need. A need that outvotes philosophy, poetry, and reason. The dose is small, just enough to level the horizon. You lie down, the journal pressed to your chest. It smells like ink and old paper and something faintly herbal. Maybe lavender. Maybe mould. Maybe both. You think about the version of yourself who wrote all of this, who tried to solve it, who thought somehow that writing it all down would protect the future you from slipping too far. You owe him a thank you. You owe him an apology. You dream this time of a staircase that never ends. At the bottom is a desk, a bottle, a pen. You keep climbing. It's easier to forget that you're not the only one, that other people, especially women, are riding the same slow ship into oblivion. It's just quieter with them, discreet, dignified. You have the luxury of public decay, pacing hallways in a loose cravat, muttering about philosophy, reeking of opium and excuses. But for the women, the laudanum comes wrapped in silk, served with tea, and offered as a solution to everything from headaches to hysteria. And most of them never get the chance to be called addicts, just nervous, delicate, unwell. You see it in Mrs. Hawthorne, the woman who rents the room just below yours. She rarely leaves her chambers, and when she does, she moves like someone walking underwater. She wears gloves inside, always gloves, and when she speaks, it's as if she's choosing each word from a high shelf, polite, muted, gently dazed. The first time you spoke, you were both reaching for the same chipped teacup in the common kitchen. She apologised twice, once for the near collision, and once simply for being alive, it seemed. You nodded, offered a smile, and tried not to lean on the counter in case your knees gave out. She noticed, of course. "You're one of them," she said, not unkindly. "One of who?" "The sleepers." You didn't know how to respond to that, so you didn't. But she was right, and so was she. You've since seen the bottle in her handbag, wrapped in a linen handkerchief like a fragile heirloom. You've seen her sip it in small, dainty doses, always with tea, always from a silver spoon that belonged to her grandmother. She told you that once, without context. She never talks about how much she takes. You never ask. You learned quickly that the women take it differently. Not less, just better. The city gives them permission, in a way. A woman can faint in public and be offered a seat. A man collapses, and he's in the gutter. The apothecaries hand out soothing syrup like it's a seasonal treat, especially to those married to men in politics, or law, or medicine. Especially if they're married at all. Laudanum is a cure for being female in London, a cure for childbirth, for anxiety, for boredom, for dream, for the unbearable act of waking up every morning in a corset and pretending not to exist. You've heard whispers of women taking it to quiet the sound of their own minds. To survive marriages, to survive their own children. Some apothecaries even market their tinctures with flowery names like Lady's Ease or Mother's Peace. You once saw an advertisement claiming it would restore domestic harmony in just 3 spoonfuls. You laughed until you spilled your tea. You once spent an afternoon in the drawing room with 4 women, all loosely connected by a cousin of someone's cousin, all dressed in lace, all high as cathedrals. They sat in a circle, embroidery hoops in hand, not one stitch completed. They spoke in circles about their nerves, their sleep, their men, their dreams. It was the slowest conversation you've ever witnessed, like watching time eat itself. You could feel the laudanum humming in the room just under the surface. One of them, a Miss Copley, leaned toward you mid-sentence and whispered, "Sometimes I forget which way is up." You nodded. That's not always a bad thing. And then she laughed, a long, breathless laugh that trailed off into a sigh. You find their usage more graceful, less greedy. There's ritual to it, a veil of gentility. You, on the other hand, are starting to drink straight from the bottle more often, sometimes forgetting whether it's the first sip of the day or the last. You envy their control, or maybe their ability to pretend control, but you also know what it costs. Mrs. Hawthorne, for example, hasn't written to her children in weeks. She told you, while watching the rain that her son sent her a drawing of a rabbit. She forgot to reply. She meant to, but the week slipped, then another, and now it feels too late. You told her it wasn't. She said, "You always say that." You asked, "Do I?" She didn't answer. There are others too. The young widow with eyes like bruised peaches, the actress who keeps forgetting her lines and has started calling all men Thomas regardless of their actual names. Even the maid who dusts the stair banister twice in the same hour, always humming under her breath like she's holding something back. You've seen the bottles, in their bags, on their vanities, hidden in sewing boxes, the same amber glass, the same syrup, the same descent, and yet no one talks about it. Not in the way they do with men. For you it's a tragic flaw. For them it's a necessary indulgence. A whisper behind closed doors, a way to keep the porcelain from cracking. You remember a conversation you overheard in a tea house once? Two women, well dressed, each holding delicate cups like birds. One of them said, "It helps with the sadness." The other nodded. "And the other things too." "What other things?" She sipped her tea. "Everything else." That stayed with you. Everything else. What a phrase, what a blanket to wrap around all the invisible wounds. You wonder if, in another life, you might have been one of them. Someone more subtle. Someone who drifted quietly into oblivion while still managing to smile and pass the sugar. But then again, maybe that's worse. To disappear while still upright. To function while fading. At least your collapse is obvious. No one's mistaking you for stable. Back in your room, you find a note tucked under your door. From Mrs. Hawthorne. "I dreamed I was clean. It was terrible. Everything was so oud." You write a reply, "I dreamed I was worse. I think I preferred it." You slide it under her door without knocking. Later that night, you hear her playing piano through the walls, something soft, something cracked at the edges. You sit on your bed and sip slowly, listening to each note like it's the only thing holding the building together. You wonder how many of you there are. You wonder how many of you will make it. You see him for the first time on a Sunday morning, which is unfortunate, because Sunday mornings always seem to come with the sharpest hangovers and the driest bread. You're sitting on the front step of the boarding house, squinting into a pale sun that has no business being that bright, when he walks by in a cloud of aftershave and damp wool. The Reverend Thompson, local clergyman, pillar of the community, wobbly as a three-legged table. You've seen plenty of men drunk in daylight, drunk on gin, drunk on grief, drunk on their own voices, but the Reverend carries it differently. He's not stumbling exactly, but he sways just enough to make you nervous, like a metronome slightly out of time. And when he stops to greet you, tipping his hat with a smile that stretches too far, you see it in his eyes. Not gin, not whiskey, no red nose or flushed cheeks, no slurred speech, just that slow blink, that sleepy warmth, that peculiar shine you know too well. He's one of you. "Well, good morning, my friend," he says, with the bright cheer of someone who's been rehearsing social interaction in a mirror. "Fine day for the soul," you nod. "Bit loud for the body," he chuckles. Quite stir, you expect him to move on, but he hesitates, shifts his weight like he's balancing on a ship deck. Then he glances up at the sky and says, "Funny thing, pain, always sneaks up on you in the quiet moments." You don't reply, you just stare at him, and for a split second something unspoken passes between you. Recognition. Not of the man, but of the condition, of the ache, the dependency, the daily negotiation between belief and bodily rebellion. He's about to speak again when Mrs. Griggs opens the door behind you, broom in hand and eyebrows cocked. "Morning, Reverend," she says, more coldly than reverently. He tips his hat again and disappears down the street like fog in reverse, light on his feet but undeniably blurred at the edges. You think about him all afternoon. It's easy to forget, in your little vacuum of sorrow, that men of the cloth suffer too, that they're not all saints with clear minds and iron wills. They preach about deliverance while swallowing their own despair with their morning dose. You wonder how many sermons Reverend Thompson has delivered while floating gently above the pulpit, thoughts fuzzed, spine humming. You begin noticing him more after that. He visits the boarding house on occasion, ostensibly to offer prayers to the ill, though the ill rarely answer the door. Sometimes he stands outside the bakery for a suspiciously long time without buying anything. Once, you see him standing on a bridge, staring at the water as if it's asked him a very personal question. You finally approach him again one Thursday evening. The church is empty but unlocked. Candles are lit. Though no service is underway, you find him in the last pew alone, a book in his lap and an open bottle of tonic on the bench beside him. "Is that yours?" you ask, nodding toward the bottle. He doesn't look surprised. "Belongs to everyone, doesn't it? The great equalizer." You sit beside him. The bench creaks. The church smells like wax and old wood and whatever incense they use to hide the mildew. "Funny," he says, "how the church rails against temptation, but no one minds a vicar with a bottle in his vest." You glance at him. They think it's wine. Bless them. He takes a measured sip, elegant, restrained. The man has practice. You notice he doesn't grimace, doesn't even blink. "Do they know?" you ask. He laughs. "Of course they do. They just don't say anything. They'd rather have a sedated priest than a manic one. Laudanum keeps me kind, keeps the sermons tidy." You shake your head, more in admiration than judgment. "There was a time I thought I could use it like a tool," he adds. "A bridge between heaven and earth. A way to quiet the flesh and hear the divine. And now? Now I just try to make it through Vespers without falling asleep mid-blessing." You sit in the Byghtons for a while. The stained glass filters the last of the daylight into soft colours. The air is still, the kind of still that makes you want to confess something. "Do you ever wonder," you say, "what it would be like to be clean again?" "Every day," he replies. "And then I remember the reasons I started." You nod, because you understand. The Reverend doesn't preach at you, doesn't offer advice, doesn't quote scripture. He just sips and sighs and looks very, very tired, and you think maybe salvation isn't about being good. Maybe it's just about showing up, sitting in the pew, letting someone know they're not the only one who's lost their way. Before you leave, he says, "If you ever want to talk," you smile. "Talking's dangerous. Talking is human." You return to your room that night feeling more grounded than usual. You don't take a dose right away. Instead, you sit at your desk and write, "There is holiness in survival, even if it's quiet, even if it shakes." Later, when you finally reach for the bottle, it's with less urgency, less worship. You think of Reverend Thompson again when you see a funeral procession 2 days later. A long line of black coats and bowed heads. You wonder what would happen if he were the one in the coffin. Would they speak of his kindness, his wisdom? Would anyone mention the bottle hidden in his robes? You suspect not, because no one wants to admit that even men of God need escape. That sometimes prayer is just a whisper into a void, and laudanum is the only thing that answers. And maybe that's okay. Maybe holiness looks different these days. Maybe it wobbles. He tells you it's hysteria. The doctor, that is, with the red hands and the sigh that arrives before his diagnosis. He doesn't even examine you properly, just peers over his wire-rimmed spectacles, listens to your account of the sweating, the tremors, the moments where your vision seems to echo, and then says, "Ah, yes, a nervous condition, possibly melancholia, most likely hysteria." You stare at him, hysteria. He scribbles something on a scrap of paper like a man signing away a burden and offers it to you with the same reverent flourish you've seen him use to adjust his collar. The prescription reads like a punchline: 1 dram of laudanum twice daily. Rest. Cold compress if required. Avoid vigorous yachting or emotionally taxing environments. "Emotionally taxing environments," you mutter, tucking the slip into your coat. The doctor nods solemnly. "Poets are particularly vulnerable." You resist the urge to ask how many poems he's read in his life. The irony would be laughable if it weren't so exhausting. Here you are, clearly dependent, clearly unraveling, and his great plan is more of the same, just with a different label. Not addiction, not dependency, not withdrawal, just hysteria. The same diagnosis they hand out to widows who cry too long, or girls who dream too vividly. And it makes you wonder if that's all it takes to be written off by the medical establishment. A tremor, a metaphor, and an inconvenient fondness for oblivion. You leave the office with your dignity slightly wrinkled and the kind of headache that starts behind the eyes and crawls into your thoughts. The fog outside feels brighter somehow, harsher. You squint up at the sky and feel every ounce of that prescription rattling in your bones. The truth is, you already knew he wouldn't help. Not really, but part of you still hoped, for what exactly you're not sure. Understanding, compassion, a name for what you've become that doesn't sound like weakness. Instead, you're left with a word that's mostly been used to describe women fainting in novels. Hysteria, as if your whole body is just overreacting. Later that night, you tell Julian about it, over lukewarm tea and crumbling biscuits. He called it hysteria, Julian chokes. Did he offer you smelling salts in a chaise lounge? You smirk. No chaise, but I'm to avoid vigorous reading. Julian raises his cup like a toast, to the death of the literate addict. You clink cups. The sarcasm doesn't help much, but it's better than despair. You both sit in silence for a while, watching the fire do its half-hearted best to be warm. Julian fidgets with the edge of his sleeve. He's twitchier lately. Not much, but enough that you notice. His doses must be slipping. You wonder if he's rationing or if the apothecary has finally cut him off. Maybe he tried to taper. Maybe he's running out of money. Or maybe he is just trying something neither of you have ever dared. Sobriety. Have you ever considered stopping, you ask. Julian doesn't look up. Every day. But then I remember I like being alive. And being alive in this particular body, in this particular city, is, let's say, suboptimal without assistance. You nod. That tracks. Still, the doctor's words linger. Hysteria. It sticks in your teeth like a poppy seed. Not just because it's wrong, but because you can't shake the feeling that even if he knew what this was, he still wouldn't care. Not really. You're not sick in a way that earns sympathy. You're sick in a way that earns frowns, suggestions to walk more, eat less bread, breathe deeply, maybe travel. It makes you wonder how many others like you have walked into a doctor's office, asking for help, and left with a prescription and a thinly veiled insult. You start noticing things. A man on the street, twitching his fingers against his leg like he's counting seconds between cravings. A woman in a bonnet clutching her handbag too tightly. Knuckles pale, eyes glassy. A boy outside the chemist's shop pacing, all of them carrying the same invisible ache. All of them probably told it's just a passing condition. And the doctors, most of them are using too. You've seen it. The surgeon near Tottenham Court with the twitching eyelid. The apothecary assistant who refills bottles with shaky hands. The physician at the sanatorium who always smells faintly of cinnamon and opium. Even the man who called your condition hysteria had a bottle in plain view on his desk. You noticed it immediately, square, brown, unlabelled, but unmistakable. You wonder if he drinks his before or after the consultations, or perhaps both. Maybe he believes he's immune to dependency because he uses it professionally. You write about it in your notebook. The people meant to fix us are sick themselves. We are patients of patients. You draw a little diagram beside it, a serpent swallowing itself. Except the serpent has a monocle and a medical bag. Mrs. Hawthorne reads it over your shoulder. You hadn't noticed her come in. He said I had a nervous disposition, she offers quietly. You glance up. Did he offer you laudanum? She smiles. No, he offered me marriage. You blink. Same thing, she says. Later that night you take a smaller dose, not because of the doctor, but because you want to feel something sharp, something true, for a moment, just to remind yourself that you still can. It doesn't go well. Your stomach turns, your hands ache. The room seems too wide, too empty. You feel every heartbeat like a judgment. The fog doesn't arrive when you expect it to. It lingers, just out of reach. Taunting. You cave, take more, wait. When it finally hits, it's not gentle. It's overwhelming. You feel like you're drowning in syrup. The relief isn't relief, it's escape, poorly disguised. Before you fall asleep, you write one more line in the notebook. Maybe it's not hysteria. Maybe it's grief. For the person I was before all this. And you mean it. You try to quit on a Thursday. Not because it's symbolic or meaningful. Thursdays have no particular weight in your memory. It's just that you wake up with your hand already halfway to the bottle, and something inside you quietly says, not today. You're not sure whose voice it is. Might be the version of yourself who wrote the journal. Might be the ghost of someone who once believed in you. Might even be the rats, honestly. Regardless, it stops you. You stare at the bottle for a long time. The liquid inside glows amber in the morning light, dancing just a little when your fingers tremble. You set it down, step away, as if that gesture alone is revolutionary. It starts fine. You eat a slice of bread and pretend it tastes like food instead of regret. You splash water on your face and try to look alive in the mirror. You fail. But that's normal. Everything about the first hour is normal, quiet, manageable. You begin to wonder if the fear of quitting was worse than the quitting itself. You write a few lines in your notebook, something about stone steps and missing shoes. You're not even sure it's a metaphor. You find an old envelope under your bed with 2p in it and allow yourself a moment of triumph. You consider buying tea. Then hour 2 arrives. You can feel it behind your eyes first, like someone pressing their thumbs gently into your skull. Your arms tingle. Your back starts to itch. Your thoughts scatter like startled birds. You try to breathe through it, sip water, focus on your breath the way Julian once said you should. You last 11 minutes before pacing begins. Hour 3 brings the nausea. It's not dramatic, no vomiting, not yet, but it's enough to make food impossible. You chew a piece of apple and feel it sit like lead behind your ribs. The world starts to pulse at the edges. Sounds become sharp, accusatory. The ticking clock you ignored yesterday now feels like a hammer in your brain. You take a walk, because movement might help, because staying inside feels dangerous, because you're trying to be noble, and that's what noble people do. They take walks. You wrap yourself in your coat and step into the cold air. The city is moving without you, as always. Horses clop by, men yell about oysters. A woman walks her child with one hand and eats roasted chestnuts with the other. You hate everyone, just for being able to function. You try to make it to the park. That's the goal. Just reach the bench under the lopsided elm tree, sit down and exist. But halfway there, your knees decide they have other plans. You lean against a brick wall outside a butcher's shop, pretending to examine the cuts of meat hanging in the window while your vision stutters and your breath comes short. You stay there for 20 minutes. A small boy offers you a biscuit. You think he might be hallucinated. He isn't. "Are you sick, mister?" he asks, not unkindly. You nod. "A bit." He nods back, satisfied, and walks away. You watch him go and wonder what kind of man you've become, wobbling outside butcher shops, accepting pity from children, praying to gods you don't believe in for the tremors to stop. You return home, somehow. Your legs feel like wood, your hands like paper, your chest is tight. You climb the stairs and collapse into your chair, eyes closed, listening to the sound of your heart trying to beat its way out. You consider taking the bottle out of the drawer. You don't, not yet. Hour 5 is when the real trouble starts. Hallucinations, maybe. You can't tell. Time folds inward. You see yourself standing in the corner watching. You hear someone reciting Shakespeare under their breath, but no one else is in the room. The walls feel too close, the air too thin. Your skin crawls. You lie down on the floor because the bed feels accusatory. You stay there, staring at the ceiling, whispering to no one, promising things you can't name, that you'll change, that you'll write more, that you'll eat, that you'll never take another drop, that you'll only take a little, if absolutely necessary, that this was all a mistake, that you're stronger than this. You are not. Hour 6 is tears. You don't know why. Nothing happens, you just cry, quietly, without drama. No sobbing, just water leaking out of your eyes like something's broken inside you that can't be fixed. You don't even feel sassy. You feel empty, like sadness moved out weeks ago and forgot to lock the door. You hear voices in the hall, Mrs. Griggs and her cousin discussing rent again. They knock on someone else's door this time, and you find yourself hoping selfishly that someone else is further behind than you. You hate that thought, but not enough to stop thinking it. You reach for your notebook, write a single word. Please, you don't know who it's for. By the 7th hour, your hands have started to cramp. You press them between your knees to stop the spasms. You haven't eaten since the apple. Your breath smells sour. You keep thinking about your father, though you can't remember his face, just the shape of his silence. You wonder if he ever tried to quit anything. Hour 8, and you break. It's not dramatic, not a scene, just a hand slow and shaking, and reaching into the drawer. The bottle is cold, the cork is stubborn. You pour one measured dose into the spoon, and your hands jerk so badly you spill half of it. You drink the rest. The world returns slowly. First your stomach calms, then the ringing in your ears fades. Your breath evens out, your muscles relax. You feel like a deflated balloon, like you could melt into the floorboards and sleep for a year. You lie there, eyes closed, ashamed and relieved, and too tired to think about either. Later in the notebook you write, 8 hours, that's all I lasted. A work day. The worst part is not that I failed. It's that the bottle still feels like forgiveness. You don't sleep that night. Not really. Just drift. And somewhere in that grey, unfinished dream, you see yourself climbing a mountain made of spoons. You never reach the top. You search your pockets, again, because you're convinced something will appear if you dig deep enough. 3 coins, a broken pensy, the red ribbon from a notebook you can't remember buying. That's it. Nothing else. The bottle sits on the desk, safe, full enough to grant temporary peace, but you hesitate. You know the pattern. You've been here before. The first sip, the warmth spreading, the fog rolling in to blur edges, to soften thoughts, to patch the holes in your mind. You also know the cost, the ache afterward, the crawling, gnawing dread that comes like a second heartbeat. You're running low on both courage and money, but the hand moves anyway, trembling. You decide to make a small meal first. It's not much. A slice of bread, a wedge of cheese that might have been edible yesterday, a cup of tea that's barely warm. You eat mechanically, chewing slowly because the stomach has its own rules now, unconnected to hunger. The flavour is muted, like the city itself. Even the bread seems to sigh as it enters your mouth. You wash it down with tea, but the bitter warmth does little to settle the nerves. Your hand twitches at your side, not enough for anyone to notice, just enough to remind you that you're not in control. You pick up the bottle, cork it, uncork it, tilt it. A ritual in motion. You know it by heart. The taste, the warmth, the slow slide into the edges of consciousness that no one else inhabits. You watch the liquid swirl in the glass, amber catching the candlelight in crooked arcs. The first sip hits the back of your throat, bitter and sweet and familiar. The tremor in your hand slows, your shoulders unclench, the room softens, the edges of the walls breathe. Even the floorboards seem to sag less. Once, this would have been a promise of escape. Now it's just a pause. You close your eyes, resting your head against the wall, and let the fog move in. You hear the city faintly through the window. Carriages, footsteps, a dog barking, someone laughing too loudly in an alley somewhere. It's comforting and alien at once. You drift in the half-conscious place where thoughts curl like smoke. Ideas flicker. Memories slip in half-formed fragments. The echo of your own handwriting rises up from the notebook on the floor. You think you might have written poetry last night, or maybe it was a letter. Either way, doesn't matter. You no longer care. The notebook draws you next. You pick it up, feeling the familiar roughness of leather, the ink stains along the edges, flipping through pages. You recognize handwriting, but not always the words. The dates confuse you. Events run together. You pause at one page with a drawing of a tree, twisting and strange, its roots curling into spirals that almost seem alive. A note in the margin reads, "Don't forget the river." You remember the river. You remember walking alongside it at some impossible hour, listening to the water, smelling coal and mud, feeling small in the vastness of London. A ghost of calm washes over you, brief and fragile. And then comes the itch, the creeping ache of withdrawal. You were fooling yourself, thinking one dose could hold it off, but the nerves are persistent. Your legs twitch, your hands curl, your stomach churns. You shift in the chair, trying to ignore it. The bottle is nearby, safe, waiting. You want more, but you don't touch it. Not yet. You try to write. Your pen scratches unevenly over the paper. Sentences collapse, words disappear. You tear the page out, crumple it, toss it aside. You hear footsteps outside, probably Mrs. Griggs, probably the cousin. Your pulse quickens, not from fear exactly, but from awareness of your own fragility. A tap at the door. Nothing. Just a shadow. You breathe. You're alone, but not really. The city, the fog, the rats in the walls, they are here. Watching, waiting, whispering in your skull. You lie back, bottle in reach. Notebook on your chest. Candle flickers, shadows sway. Time dilates. You drift. Half asleep, half awake. Somewhere, far away, the Thames murmurs like a lullaby. You remember it, though the memory is fractured. The river bends in your mind like a silver thread. You imagine walking along it again, bottle in pocket, fog wrapping you up like a cloak. You might even be happy for a moment, or at least not entirely miserable. You close your eyes. The tremor in your hand slows, the ache in your back eases. The world contracts into a tiny bearable space. You know the lull won't last. You know there will be more mornings like this, more wandering, more hunger, more trembling. But right now, in this amber light with the bottle and notebook and the faint echo of the city, you are suspended. Nothing is urgent. Nothing is real. Nothing hurts enough to force you out of the chair. Somewhere behind the fog, the past and the present meet. Faces you once knew drift in and out. Letters you never sent whisper. Dreams intertwine with memory. and for a brief, terrifying moment, you're both alive and not alive, watching yourself in a room that exists only for a few breaths, and that's enough. By the time you open your eyes, the candle is down to a stub, wax pooling in a soft, glistening mess on the desk. The room is quiet in that way that makes even the smallest noises feel intrusive. The creak of a floorboard, a distant cough, the rat moving just behind the skirting board. You stretch, though your body protests, every joint stiff and unwilling. The fog inside your skull has softened for now, but you can feel the edges returning, like the tide creeping back in. You reach for the notebook, thumb brushing over a half-dried ink smear, and you remember a line you wrote yesterday. Or was it a week ago? Time is slippery now. The river knows more than I do. You smile faintly. Not a proper smile, just the twitch of lips that makes your face feel alive. You stand, wobbling slightly, hands braced against the desk. You pace, one foot in front of the other, letting your brain catch up to your legs. The apartment smells faintly of old tea and wax, the faint scent of decay lingering in the corners. You're aware of it, but don't care. It doesn't matter anymore. It never really did. Outside, London breathes. The gaslights flicker in the fog like sleepy eyes, and the faint clatter of carriages on cobblestones carries up to your window. Somewhere a man shouts, and a woman laughs, and the sound is at once foreign and familiar. You feel the pulse of the city in your bones, a rhythm you can follow if only slightly, a beat to guide you through the fog inside your skull. You pause by the window watching. You've never felt more isolated and somehow more connected. You consider going out. Just a walk, nothing more. The streets are wet with mist and yesterday's drizzle. The smell of coal and mud sharp in your nose, but your body resists. Your legs ache, your stomach rumbles, and your hands shake even when held still. Still, the idea of the streets calls to you, and you know you'll answer. Not for adventure, not for company, not even for food, but because moving is a defiance of inertia, a way to remind yourself that you are not entirely gone. Your fingers brush over the bottle. It sits like a promise, a threat. You consider it for a long moment. You could take just a few drops, steady the tremor, smooth the edges of thought, or you could wait. Test your will. Prove something to yourself. But the fog already coils tighter at the thought of abstinence. The bottle has become an extension of your body, not a tool, not a friend, but a weight you can't ignore. You decide to do both. Just enough to calm, just enough to remember. You pour a careful measure into the spoon. The taste is familiar, bitter and sweet in a way that tastes of history and regret. Your muscles unclench, your spine softens, and you feel the floor beneath you less like a trap and more like a cradle. You close your eyes and let the room dissolve around you. The desk, the notebook, the candle, all fade into the amber haze of the dose. Time bends. You drift. Memories mingle with imagined events. Faces flicker at the edges of your vision. Voices whisper from the corners. You hear Julian somewhere, muttering about poetry that no longer exists, a voice caught between the living and the remembered. You hear the rats scratching softly behind the walls, their tiny presence somehow comforting. You could be asleep or awake. It doesn't matter. It is enough that you are not completely alone in this. And when you finally lift your head, the candle's stub casting long, wobbling shadows, you realize you've written another line in your notebook without noticing. A single, jagged sentence. Even in the fog, someone walks beside me. You pause, reading it twice. There is no one, yet the line feels true. Perhaps it's Julian, perhaps it's Mrs. Hawthorne, perhaps it's the version of yourself that still remembers who you were before the amber syrup took up residence in your veins. Or perhaps it's just the rats. You tuck the notebook under your arm and sit by the window, bottle in hand, and listening to the distant sounds of London, thinking that perhaps survival doesn't mean thriving. Perhaps survival simply means noticing that the city still moves, and that for now, you move too. The streets are wetter than usual tonight, though you're not sure if that's the rain or the mist rolling off the Thames. Your boots squelch against the cobblestones, a soft, uneven percussion that keeps your mind anchored to reality just enough. You hold the bottle close, the amber liquid a heartbeat in your pocket, and walk without direction, letting your body remember the rhythm of the city. Each step is a negotiation. Move slowly enough to survive, quickly enough to avoid noticing the world's small cruelties too sharply. London doesn't wait. The carriages clatter past, horses snorting steam and sweat. A man carrying barrels shouts for space. Children dash between puddles, shrieking, their laughter piercing the fog. You notice all of it, but at a distance, as if peering through glass smeared with smoke. You wander past the apothecary where Mr. Penrose works. The sign swings lazily in the wind. The mortar and pestle etched into the wood faint in the lamplight. You consider going in, but something stops you. Perhaps it's pride. Perhaps it's the memory of the last time you overshot the dose. That fire behind the eyes. The subsequent days spent pacing the floorboards, every limb humming with regret. You walk past, acknowledging the faint amber glow behind the shop window. He is probably inside, already mixing powders for someone else's salvation, and you envy him his certainty. At least he knows his work is needed. At least someone is following a rule. The alleyways you pass have become strange friends of yours. Shadows curl along the brick walls. Rubbish heaps lean as if listening. Sometimes you swear you see faces in the stonework, brief flashes of emotion that disappear when you blink. The rats are out tonight too, or perhaps your imagination lends them courage. One scuttles past your heel. You stop almost instinctively, and it looks up at you, eyes glinting. For a moment it's as if it's studying your resolve or lack of it. You wonder if it remembers last week, when you spilled half a dose and cursed at it like a fool. Perhaps rats, like ghosts, keep records in ways humans cannot understand. You find yourself at the edge of a small park, the iron railings dripping with condensation. The bench beneath the elm tree is vacant, waiting, and you collapse onto it, coat-soaked and stiff against your shoulders. You uncork the bottle just enough to take a few measured drops, the liquid warming your stomach and steadying your trembling hands. The fog curls in, seeping into your coat, wrapping your shoulders, pressing against your face like a mother you never had. The warmth and weight make the ache in your spine retreat slightly, though it never fully disappears. You close your eyes. For a few minutes the world is bearable. You hear a carriage, faint footsteps. Someone humming a tune that doesn't quite exist anywhere else. The city breathes around you. Somewhere in the shadows, a violin plays, though you don't know whose. A soft, thin sound, melancholy but comforting, threading through the damp air. You imagine Julian walking past, notebook in hand, muttering lines of poetry to the mist, or Mrs. Hawthorne playing her piano behind closed doors, each note steadying her nerves, each silence filled with the music of survival. Perhaps it's not only the laudanum that maintains you. Perhaps the rhythm of life, faint as it is, reaches through the fog and reminds you that you exist. Your mind drifts, half awake, half dreaming. You picture the Thames curling and silvered under the gaslight. You imagine the water lifting you, cradling you, swallowing the ache of the morning, the tension of the afternoon, the shame of failures left behind. You wonder if the river knows more than you do. It seems likely. It has seen more men like you than it has stars in the foggy sky. Perhaps the river remembers everything, while you remember nothing. You scribble a line in your notebook, pen moving of its own volition. I walk beside the fog and the water whispers my name. You look up, blinking. The bench is damp. The air smells of coal and wet earth and rain-soaked wood. You are alone, yet not entirely. Somewhere in the distance someone laughs. Somewhere someone cries. Somewhere rats scurry and ghosts mutter, and the city moves on, indifferent and enduring. You draw the notebook close, tilt the bottle to your lips once more. Just a few drops to keep the edges soft. The tremors quiet for now, the ache recedes. You let the fog inside you swell and settle, letting the world blur. Just enough until it becomes bearable. For tonight, that is enough. The next morning you wake to a faint ache behind your eyes, a residue of the fog that didn't fully lift overnight. You lie still for a while, listening to the distant hum of London, the clatter of hooves, a bell from the nearby church, the faint murmur of voices carried by the wind. You consider staying in bed, pretending that the day doesn't exist, but hunger nudges you with stubborn persistence. You rise slowly, joints protesting, and make your way to the small basin. Cold water splashes against your face, shocking the skin, but not enough to make you entirely alert. It's enough to remind you that time is passing, that the city continues with or without your participation. You're both part of it and separate, like a shadow moving along the cobblestones, present but unacknowledged. Breakfast is sparse as usual, a slice of bread hard at the edges, and a small piece of cheese that may once have been edible. You chew mechanically, ignoring the taste, focusing instead on the rhythm of your own actions. Chew, swallow, sip, Each motion is a small victory, a demonstration of agency in a life increasingly dictated by the amber liquid tucked away in your pocket. The bottle calls quietly, softly, promising calm, warmth, oblivion. You resist for a moment, just long enough to finish eating, then lift it and take a measured sip. The familiar burn slides down your throat, taking some of the ache with it, leaving behind a slight haze that eases the tremors in your hands. It's not relief, not exactly, just a pause. A window in which you can exist without too much friction against yourself. You decide to leave the boarding house despite the chill in the morning air and the grey fog clinging low to the streets. The city stretches out before you, cobblestones slick with moisture, gaslights flickering weakly in the mist. You walk without purpose, letting the streets guide you, letting your feet remember the rhythm of movement while your mind hovers in the spaces between thought and memory. The apothecary is behind you, the penny dreadful pharmacist further away, and still you carry the weight of the bottle like a tether, a small heart beating in your pocket. The fog softens the city, blurring edges, hiding details. You like it that way. It makes the world less sharp. In the square, a violinist plays, notes sliding into the fog, carrying melancholy and warmth together. You stop and listen. There's something about the sound that reminds you of days before the syrup, before the tremors, before the spiralling collection of half-written pages and missed appointments. You remember walking by the river, or at least the memory of all of it, the water moving silently, inexorably, holding more secrets than the city itself. The violin song lifts and drops, like a pulse in the grey, and you feel a strange kinship with it, alive, fragile, and enduring in spite of everything. You continue walking, past the market stalls where vendors shout prices, where the smell of roasted chestnuts and fresh bread mingles with coal smoke. People pass you in a blur, faces sharp one moment and melting the next. You notice a young boy chasing a dog through a puddle, laughing so freely it almost hurts to watch. You remember that laughter from your own childhood, though the details are frayed, half erased by years and laudanum. You pause, watching the boy, and for a fleeting instant the city feels like a place you might belong. Then you remember Mrs. Hawthorne and the women like her, who live quietly in rooms above and below, managing their melancholy with precision and grace. They take the same amber liquid, but with rituals and ceremony, a gentility you envy. They are delicate, yet they survive. You, on the other hand, stagger, spill, tremble, and scribble lines in notebooks that will never be read. Their quiet endurance is alien to you, but you understand it, in a way that makes your own survival seem loud and unrefined by comparison. You end up near the river by mid-morning, the Thames stretching wide and silver under the fog. The water moves with a patience you can barely imagine, indifferent to human need, human suffering. You lean against the railings, bottle in hand, watching the surface ripple, imagining all the people who have walked this path, who have relied on the same amber comfort to endure their days. Somewhere upstream, a rowboat drifts silently. Somewhere downstream, a bell who tolls. You sip slowly, the taste sharp in your mouth, the fog inside your head pressing against the walls of your skull. And for a moment, you feel something you haven't felt in weeks. A strange, unsteady clarity. Not enough to last, not enough to be safe, but enough to know that the city is vast, that it moves, and that you, however shakily, however tremblingly, still move with it. You write a line in your notebook. The river doesn't ask questions, neither should I. The wind lifts the fog slightly, some brushing against your coat and stirring the hair at your temple. You exhale. You're alive, though fragile. The bottle is still there. The city is still there. And for now, that is sufficient. Evening comes without fanfare. The fog thickens, curling around lampposts and doorways, clinging to the cobblestones like a damp blanket. You walk through it deliberately, boots squelching, coat pulled tight, bottle tucked against your side like a secret. The streets are quieter now. The vendors having packed up, the children returned into homes you don't know, the laughter and shouting replaced with distant clops of horses and the occasional cough. You pass a stray dog, its coat slick with rain, ears back, tail low, and for a moment you imagine yourself in that shape, small, cautious, observing the world but avoiding its full force. You'd move unnoticed if you could. Perhaps you do in your own way. The apothecary is closed, of course. The amber light no longer shines behind the glass, the sign swinging in the wet wind. You linger briefly, peering through the window, remembering last week, the measured drops, the glow, the edges of reality softening until it became tolerable. You press your forehead against the cool glass. The world beyond continues regardless. You breathe in the damp air and let the city swallow you, ghost-like, walking on sidewalks slick with mist and memory. You feel the tremor returning, subtle at first, then persistent, like a small drumbeat you cannot ignore. You duck into an alley to rest. The walls are close, lined with old brick and peeling advertisements, damp from rain, fragrant with coal smoke and decomposing leaves. You sit on a crate someone left behind, bottle in hand, contemplating the day. You tally your failures silently, rent unpaid, food purchased sparingly, work ignored, the tremor escalating. And yet here you are, breathing, alive, somehow enduring. It is not triumph, but it is survival, and tonight that is sufficient. From somewhere above, a cat hisses, a rat scuttles, and the wind rattles the window of a nearby shop. You listen. Each sound is distinct, clear, reminding you that you exist in a world teeming with life, however chaotic or indifferent. You uncork the bottle and sip, not enough to dissolve the edges, but enough to calm the tremor in your hands. The fog in your skull thickens, gentle and protective like a shawl wrapped around a shivering frame. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the warmth slide down your throat into your stomach, a small mercy. When you open them, the city has grown darker, the gaslights flickering as if uncertain of their purpose. A man shuffles past, umbrella dripping, shoulders hunched. You notice him, but do not interact. No one sees you exactly, and perhaps that is as it should be. You imagine the river again, its steady current, indifferent to time and human frailty. Somewhere upstream, perhaps a child drops a stone, sending ripples into the water. You imagine them travelling far across centuries, just as your steps have carried you far in spirit, though barely in space. You write a few lines in your notebook, pen moving almost unconsciously. The city hums while I stagger. I stagger while the city hums, and neither stops. The line feels correct. You read it twice. It's not profound, not necessarily clever, but it captures something true about your place in the world. Present but diminished, moving but fragile, surviving by degrees. You rise, coat heavy, boots wet, and continue walking. Every street feels simultaneously familiar and alien. A carousel of ghosts, puddles, and whispers. Somewhere in the distance a violin plays again, melancholy and threadbare. You slow your steps, listening. For a moment the tremor in your hand ceases, replaced by a rhythm you cannot name. You follow it blindly, letting it guide you through the fog, past empty shops, over slick cobblestones, toward nothing and everything at once. The bottle remains in your pocket, the notebook pressed to your chest, the fog and the city around you, and for the first time in hours you feel both lost and found, not relieved, not content, just present, just moving, just surviving. The night stretches long, and you realize the streets are nearly empty, save for the occasional carriage clattering past and a solitary figure shuffling in the fog. You wander without aim, letting your boots splash through puddles, the wetness cold against your toes, your coat heavy and sticky with condensation. The bottle rests in your pocket like a familiar weight, but tonight you carry it almost absent-mindedly, as if its presence is an extension of yourself rather than a crutch. The city is muted and still, the gaslights casting pools of yellow-orange that shimmer in the mist. You pass familiar alleys, the crooked sign of the apothecary, the bridge where the river runs dark and wide, and each landmark seems both welcoming and threatening, a reminder of the life you continue to navigate in partial consciousness. You think about the people who inhabit the boarding house, Julian painting at his desk, Mrs. Hawthorne playing her quiet piano, the other women managing their nerves with discipline and ritual. You think about the rats, polite and judgmental, and even the Reverend Thompson, clinging to his own carefully measured indulgences. All of them are surviving, like you, but differently. Each has chosen a rhythm, some delicate and disciplined, others haphazard, urgent, fraying at the edges, and you realize with a dull ache in your chest that you have been improvising your own, guided by the bottle, the notebook, the fog, the river, and the distant hum of the city itself. You climb a short flight of stairs to a terrace overlooking the Thames. The river glimmers in the faint light, swollen with rain and reflection, flowing silently and indifferent. You lean against the railing, the wind tugging at your coat and hair, and for a brief, terrifying moment you allow yourself to feel the weight of everything. The lost days, the tremors, the failures. the moments of fleeting clarity. You think about the journal, the pages filled with your own handwriting, a map of madness and survival intertwined. You flip it open, fingers tracing the ink that has become both guide and witness. A line catches your eye. Even in the fog, someone walks beside me. You consider the truth of it. Sometimes it is Julian, sometimes Mrs. Hawthorne, sometimes the rats. Sometimes it is yourself, a version you barely recognise, trudging along through the streets and alleys of a London that refuses to stop. You sip from the bottle, just enough to quiet the edges, to hold the tremor at bay and let the fog settle in your head like a soft, numbing blanket. The river flows, the city breathes, and for a few moments the world feels aligned in a way it rarely does. You think of the Royal Society, of doctors and apothecaries, of words like hysteria and melancholia, and you laugh quietly at the absurdity. They may write papers, prescribe measures, discuss morality and physiology, but they will never know the texture of a fogged street at midnight. The taste of the syrup in your mouth, the tremor that is both curse and companion, they cannot chart the rhythm you follow, the small necessary indulgences that carry you from dawn to dusk. And perhaps that is the point. Survival, in all its messy, trembling glory, is a private enterprise. It is unobserved, unremarkable, and yet utterly profound. You rise from the railing, notebook tucked under one arm, bottle in the other. The fog hugs the riverbanks, pressing against the stone walls and arches. You take a careful step forward, then another. The city hums around you, indifferent but constant. You move with it, unsteady but persistent. A figure outlined by gaslight and mist, carrying your history, your failures, and your few small victories into the night. You will not vanish completely tonight. You will not surrender entirely. And that in itself is a form of triumph. You write one last line in your notebook before closing it. A line for the night, for the fog, for the river, for the city, and for yourself. I am still walking, still trembling, still alive. You sip once more from the bottle, feeling it anchor you, and take the first steps back toward the boarding house, toward warmth, toward your fragile, unsteady survival. Outside, the fog swirls, the river whispers, the city continues, and you, at once diminished and enduring, follow along one careful, deliberate step at a time.